Chapter 61. How a gardener may get rid of the dormice that eat his peaches. Not on the same night as he had stated, but the next morning, the Count of Monte Cristo went out by the Barriere d'Affaires, taking the road to Orleans. Leaving the village of Linas, without stopping at the telegraph, which flourished its great bony arms as he passed, the Count reached the Tower of Montelheri, situated, as everyone knows, upon the highest point of the plain of that name. At the foot of the hill the Count dismounted and began to ascend by a little winding path, about 18 inches wide. When he reached the summit he found himself stopped by a hedge, upon which green fruit had succeeded to red and white flowers. Monte Cristo looked for the entrance to the enclosure, and was not long in finding a little wooden gate, working on willow hinges, and fastened with a nail and string. The Count soon mastered the mechanism, the gate opened, and he then found himself in a little garden, about 20 feet long by 12 wide, bounded on one side by part of the hedge, which contained the ingenious contrivance we have called a gate, and on the other by the old tower, covered with ivy and studded with wallflowers. No one would have thought in looking at this old, weather-beaten, floral-decked tower, which might be likened to an elderly dame dressed up to receive her grandchildren at a birthday feast, that it would have been capable of telling strange things, if, in addition to the menacing ears which the proverb says all walls are provided with, it had also a voice. The garden was crossed by a path of red gravel, edged by a border of thick box, of many years' growth, and of a tone and color that would have delighted the heart of Delacroix, or modern Rubens. This path was formed in the shape of the figure of 8, thus in its windings, making a walk of 60 feet in a garden of only 20. Never had Flora, the fresh and smiling goddess of gardeners, been honored with a purer or more scrupulous worship than that which was paid to her in this little enclosure. In fact, of the 20 rose trees which formed the parterre, not one bore the mark of the slug, nor were there evidences anywhere of the clustering aphis which is so destructive to plants growing in a damp soil. And yet it was not because the damp had been excluded from the garden. The earth, black as soot, the thick foliage of the trees betrayed its presence. Besides, had natural humidity been wanting, it could have been immediately supplied by artificial means, thanks to a tank of water, sunk in one of the corners of the garden, and upon which were stationed a frog and a toad, who, from antipathy, no doubt, always remained on the two opposite sides of the basin. There was not a blade of grass to be seen in the paths, or a weed in the flower beds. No fine lady ever trained and watered her geraniums, her cacti, and her rhododendrons, in her porcelain jardiniere with more pains than this hitherto unseen gardener bestowed upon his little enclosure. Monte Cristo stopped after having closed the gate, and fastened the string to the nail, and cast a look around. "The man at the telegraph," said he, "must either engage a gardener or devote himself passionately to agriculture." Suddenly he struck against something crouching behind a wheelbarrow filled with leaves. The something rose, uttering an exclamation of astonishment, and Monte Cristo found himself facing a man about 50 years old, who was plucking strawberries, which he was placing upon grape leaves. He had 12 leaves and about as many strawberries, which, on rising suddenly, he let fall from his hand. "You are gathering your crop, sir?" said Monte Cristo, smiling. 30193 m. "Excuse me, sir," replied the man, raising his hand to his cap. "I am not up there, I know, but I have only just come down." "Do not let me interfere with you in anything, my friend," said the Count. "Gather your strawberries if indeed there are any left." "I have 10 left," said the man, "for here are 11, and I had 21, 5 more than last year. But I am not surprised. The spring has been warm this year, and strawberries require heat, sir. This is the reason that, instead of the 16 I had last year, I have this year, you see, 11 already plucked. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I missed 3, they were here last night, sir. I am sure they were here. I counted them. It must be the son of Mayor Simon who has stolen them. I saw him strolling about here this morning. Ah, the young rascal, stealing in a garden. He does not know where that may lead him to." "Certainly it is wrong," said Monte Cristo, "but you should take into consideration the youth and greediness of the delinquent." "Of course," said the gardener, "but that does not make it the less unpleasant. But, sir, once more I beg pardon. Perhaps you are an officer that I am detaining here." And he glanced timidly at the Count's blue coat. 30197 m. "Calm yourself, my friend," said the Count. with the smile which he made at will either terrible or benevolent, and which now expressed only the kindliest feeling. "I am not an inspector, but a traveler, brought here by a curiosity he half repents of, since he causes you to lose your time." "Ah, my time is not valuable," replied the man with a melancholy smile. "Still it belongs to government and I ought not to waste it, but having received the signal that I might rest for an hour." Here he glanced at the sundial, for there was everything in the enclosure of Montelheri, even a sundial. "And having 10 minutes before me, and my strawberries being ripe, when a day longer, by the by, sir, do you think dormice eat them?" "Indeed, I should think not," replied Monte Cristo. "Dormice are bad neighbors for us who do not eat them preserved as the Romans did." "What? Did the Romans eat them?" said the gardener. "Ate dormice?" "I have read so in Petronius," said the Count. "Really? They can't be nice, though they do say as fat as a dormouse. It is not a wonder they are fat, sleeping all day, and only waking to eat all night. Listen. Last year I had 4 apricots. They stole one. I had 1 nectarine, only 1. Well, sir, they ate half of it on the wall. A splendid nectarine. I never ate a better." "You ate it? That is to say, the half that was left, you understand. It was exquisite, sir." "Ah, those gentlemen never choose the worst morsels, like Mayor Simon's son, who has not chosen the worst strawberries. But this year," continued the horticulturist, "I'll take care it shall not happen, even if I should be forced to sit by the whole night to watch when the strawberries are ripe." Monte Cristo had seen enough. Every man has a devouring passion in his heart, as every fruit has its worm. That of the telegraph man was horticulture. He began gathering the grape leaves which screened the sun from the grapes, and won the heart of the gardener. "Did you come here, sir, to see the telegraph?" he said. "Yes, if it isn't contrary to the rules." "Oh no," said the gardener. "Not in the least, since there is no danger that anyone can possibly understand what we are saying." "I have been told," said the Count, "that you do not always yourselves understand the signals you repeat." "That is true, sir, and that is what I like best," said the man, smiling. "Why do you like that best?" "Because then I have no responsibility. I am a machine then, and nothing else, and so long as I work, nothing more is required of me." "Is it possible," said Monte Cristo to himself, "that I can have met with a man that has no ambition? That would spoil my plans." "Sir," said the gardener, glancing at the sundial, "the 10 minutes are almost up. I must return to my post. Will you go up with me?" "I follow you." Monte Cristo entered the tower, which was divided into 3 stories. The tower contained implements, such as spades, rakes, watering pots, hung against the wall. This was all the furniture. The second was the man's conventional abode, or rather sleeping place. It contained a few poor articles of household furniture: a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a stone pitcher, and some dry herbs, hung up to the ceiling, which the Count recognized as sweet peas, and of which the good man was preserving the seeds. He had labeled them with as much care as if he had been master botanist in the Jardin de Plantes. "Does it require much study to learn the art of telegraphing?" asked Monte Cristo. "The study does not take long. It was acting as a supernumerary that was so tedious." "And what is the pay?" "1,000 francs, sir." "It is nothing." "No, but then we are lodged, as you perceive." Monte Cristo looked at the room. They passed to the 3rd story. It was the telegraph room. Monte Cristo looked in turn at the 2 iron handles by which the machine was worked. "It is very interesting," he said, "but it must be very tedious for a lifetime." "Yes. At first my neck was cramped with looking at it, but at the end of a year I became used to it, and then we have our hours of recreation, and our holidays." "Holidays?" "Yes." "When?" "When we have a fog." "Ah, to be sure. Those are indeed holidays to me. I go into the garden, I plant, I prune, I trim, I kill the insects all day long." "How long have you been here?" 10 years, and 5 as a supernumerary make 15. "You are 55 years old. How long must you have served to claim the pension?" "Oh, sir, 25 years. "And how much is the pension?" 100 crowns. "Poor humanity," murmured Monte Cristo. "What did you say, sir?" asked the man. "I was saying it was very interesting." "What was?" All you were showing me. And you really understand none of these signals. None at all. And have you never tried to understand them? Never. Why should I? But still there are some signals only addressed to you. Certainly. And do you understand them? They are always the same. And they mean nothing new. You have an hour. Or tomorrow. This is simple enough, said the Count. But look, is not your correspondent putting itself in motion? Ah yes, thank you, sir. And what is it saying? Anything you understand? Yes, it asks if I am ready. And you reply? By the same sign which at the same time tells my right-hand correspondent that I am ready, while it gives notice to my left-hand correspondent to prepare in his turn. It is very ingenious, said the Count. You will see, said the man proudly. In 5 minutes he will speak. I have then 5 minutes, said Monte Cristo to himself. It is more time than I require. My dear sir, will you allow me to ask you a question? What is it, sir? You are fond of gardening? Passionately. And you would be pleased to have, instead of this terrace of 20 feet, an enclosure of 2 acres? Sir, I should make a terrestrial paradise of it. You live badly on your 1,000 francs? Badly enough, but yet I do live. Yes, but you have a wretchedly small garden. True, the garden is not large. And then, such as it is filled with dormice who eat everything. Ah, they are my scourges. Tell me, should you have the misfortune to turn your head while your right-hand correspondent was telegraphing? I should not see him. Then what would happen? I could not repeat the signals. And then, not having repeated them, through negligence I should be fined. How much? 100 francs. The 10th of your income, that would be fine work. Ah, said the man. Has it ever happened to you? Said Monte Cristo. Once, sir, when I was grafting a rose tree. Well, suppose you were to alter a signal, and substitute another? Ah, that is another case. I should be turned off and lose my pension. 300 francs. 100 crowns, yes, sir. So you see that I am not likely to do any of these things. Not even for 15 years' wages? Come, it is worth thinking about. For 15,000 francs? Yes. Sir, you alarm me. Nonsense. Sir, you are tempting me? Just so. 15,000 francs, do you understand? Sir, let me see my right-hand correspondent. On the contrary, do not look at him but at this. What is it? What? Do you not know these bits of paper? Banknotes. Exactly, there are 15 of them. And whose are they? Yours if you like. Mine, exclaimed the man half suffocated. Yes, yours, your own property. Sir, my right-hand correspondent is signaling. Let him signal. Sir, you have distracted me. I shall be fined. That will cost you 100 francs. You see, it is your interest to take my banknotes. Sir, my right-hand correspondent redoubles his signals. He is impatient. Never mind, take these. And the Count placed the packet in the man's hands. Now this is not all, he said. You cannot live upon your 15,000 francs. I shall still have my place. No, you will lose it, for you are going to alter your correspondent's message. Oh, sir, what are you proposing? A jest. Sir, unless you force me. I think I can effectually force you. And Monte Cristo drew another packet from his pocket. Here are 10,000 more francs, he said. With the 15,000 already in your pocket, they will make 25,000. With 5,000 you can buy a pretty little house with 2 acres of land. The remaining 20,000 will bring you in 1,000 francs a year. A garden with 2 acres of land. And 1,000 francs a year. Oh heavens! Come, take them. And Monte Cristo forced the banknotes into his hand. What am I to do? Nothing very difficult. But what is it? To repeat these signs. Monte Cristo took a paper from his pocket, upon which were drawn 3 signs, with numbers to indicate the order in which they were to be worked. There, you see, it will not take long. Yes, but do this, and you will have nectarines and all the rest. The shot told, red with fever, while the large drops fell from his brow. The man executed, one after the other, the 3 signs given by the Count, in spite of the frightful contortions of the right-hand correspondent, who, not understanding the change, began to think the gardener had gone mad. As to the left-hand one, he conscientiously repeated the same signals, which were finally transmitted to the Minister of the Interior. "Now you are rich," said Monte Cristo. "Yes," replied the man. "But at what a price?" "Listen, friend," said Monte Cristo. "I do not wish to cause you any remorse. Believe me, then, when I swear to you that you have wronged no man, but on the contrary have benefited mankind." The man looked at the banknotes, felt them, counted them, turned pale, then red, then rushed into his room to drink a glass of water, but he had no time to reach the water jug, and fainted in the midst of his dried herbs. 5 minutes after the new telegram reached the minister, Debray had the horses put to his carriage, and drove to Danglars' house. "Has your husband any Spanish bonds?" he asked of the Baroness. "I think so indeed. He has 6 millions worth. He must sell them at whatever price." "Why?" "Because Don Carlos has fled from Bourges, and has returned to Spain." 30203M. "How do you know?" Debray shrugged his shoulders. "The idea of asking how I hear the news," he said. The Baroness did not wait for a repetition. She ran to her husband, who immediately hastened to his agent, and ordered him to sell at any price. When it was seen that Danglars sold, the Spanish funds fell directly. Danglars lost 500,000 francs, but he rid himself of all his Spanish shares. The same evening the following was read in Le Messager. By telegraph. "The King Don Carlos has escaped the vigilance of his guardians at Bourges, and has returned to Spain by the Catalonian frontier. Barcelona has risen in his favor." All that evening nothing was spoken of but the foresight of Danglars, who had sold his shares, and of the luck of the stock-jobber, who only lost 500,000 francs by such a blow. Those who had kept their shares, or bought those of Danglars, looked upon themselves as ruined, and passed a very bad night. Next morning Le Moniteur contained the following. It was without any foundation that Le Messager yesterday announced the flight of Don Carlos and the revolt of Barcelona. The King Don Carlos has not left Bourges, and the peninsula is in the enjoyment of profound peace. A telegraphic signal, improperly interpreted, owing to the fog, was the cause of this error. The funds rose 1% higher than before they had fallen. This, reckoning his loss, and what he had missed gaining, made the difference of 1 million to Danglars. "Good," said Monte Cristo to Morrel, who was at his house when the news arrived of the strange reverse of fortune of which Danglars had been the victim. "I have just made a discovery for 25,000 francs, for which I would have paid 100,000. "What have you discovered?" asked Morrel. "I have just discovered how a gardener may get rid of the dormice that eat his peaches." Chapter 62. Ghosts. At first sight, the exterior of the house at Auteuil gave no indications of splendor, nothing one would expect from the destined residence of the magnificent Count of Monte Cristo. But this simplicity was according to the will of its master, who positively ordered nothing to be altered outside. The splendor was within. Indeed, almost before the door opened, the scene changed. Bertuccio had outdone himself in the taste displayed in furnishing, and in the rapidity with which it was executed. It is told that the Duc d'Antin removed in a single night a whole avenue of trees that annoyed Louis XIV. In 3 days Bertuccio planted an entirely bare court with poplars, large spreading sycamores to shade the different parts of the house, and in the foreground, instead of the usual paving stones, half hidden by the grass, there extended a lawn but that morning laid down, and upon which the water was yet glistening. For the rest, the orders had been issued by the Count. He himself had given a plan to Bertuccio, marking the spot where each tree was to be planted, and the shape and extent of the lawn which was to take the place of the paving stones. Thus the house had become unrecognizable, and Bertuccio himself declared that he scarcely knew it, encircled as it was by a framework of trees. The overseer would not have objected, while he was about it, to have made some improvements in the garden, but the Count had positively forbidden it to be touched. Bertuccio made amends, however, by loading the antechambers, staircases, and mantelpieces with flowers. What, above all, manifested the shrewdness of the steward, and the profound science of the master, the one in carrying out the ideas of the other, was that this house, which appeared only the night before so sad and gloomy, impregnated with that sickly smell one can almost fancy to be the smell of time, had in a single day acquired the aspect of life, was scented with its master's favorite perfumes, and had the very light regulated according to his wish. When the Count arrived, he had under his touch his books and arms, his eyes rested upon his favorite pictures, his dogs whose caresses he loved, welcomed him in the antechamber, the birds whose songs delighted him, cheered him with their music, and the house, awakened from its long sleep, like the sleeping beauty in the wood, lived, sang, and bloomed like the houses we have long cherished, and in which, when we are forced to leave them, we leave a part of our souls. The servants passed gaily along the fine courtyard. Some, belonging to the kitchens, gliding down the stairs, restored but the previous day, as if they had always inhabited the house. Others filling the coach-houses, where the equipages, encased and numbered, appeared to have been installed for the last 50 years. And in the stables the horses replied with neighs to the grooms, who spoke to them with much more respect than many servants pay their masters. The library was divided into 2 parts on either side of the wall, and contained upwards of 2,000 volumes. One division was entirely devoted to novels, and even the volume which had been published but the day before was to be seen in its place in all the dignity of its red and gold binding. On the other side of the house, to match with the library, was the conservatory, ornamented with rare flowers, that bloomed in china jars. And in the midst of the greenhouse, marvelous alike to sight and smell, was a billiard table which looked as if it had been abandoned during the past hour by players who had left the balls on the cloth. One chamber alone had been respected by the magnificent Bertuccio. Before this room, to which you could ascend by the grand, and go out by the back staircase, the servants passed with curiosity, and Bertuccio with terror. At 5 o'clock precisely, the Count arrived before the house at Auteuil, followed by Ali. Bertuccio was awaiting this arrival with impatience, mingled with uneasiness. He hoped for some compliments, while at the same time, he feared to have frowns. Monte Cristo descended into the courtyard, walked all over the house, without giving any sign of approbation or pleasure, until he entered his bedroom, situated on the opposite side to the closed room. Then he approached a little piece of furniture, made of rosewood, which he had noticed at a previous visit. "That can only be to hold gloves," he said. "Will your Excellency deign to open it?" said the delighted Bertuccio. "And you will find gloves in it." Elsewhere the Count found everything he required: smelling bottles, cigars, knickknacks. 30207 M. "Good," he said, and M. Bertuccio left enraptured. So great, so powerful, and real was the influence exercised by this man over all who surrounded him. At precisely 6 o'clock the clatter of horses' hoofs was heard at the entrance door. It was our captain of Spahis, who had arrived on Medea. "I am sure I am the first," cried Morel. "I did it on purpose to have you a minute to myself before everyone came. Julie and Emmanuel have 1,000 things to tell you. Ah, really this is magnificent. But tell me, Count, will your people take care of my horse? Do not alarm yourself, my dear Maximilian, they understand. I mean, because he wants petting. If you had seen at what a pace he came, like the wind." "I should think so. A horse that cost 5,000 francs, said Monte Cristo, in the tone which a father would use towards a son. "Do you regret them?" asked Morel, with his open laugh. Certainly not," replied the Count. "No. I should only regret if the horse had not proved good. It is so good, that I have distanced M. de Châteaurenaud, one of the best riders in France, and M. Debray, who both mount the minister's Arabians, and close on their heels are the horses of Madame Danglars, who always go at 6 leagues an hour." "Then they follow you?" asked Monte Cristo. "See, they are here." And at the same minute a carriage with smoking horses, accompanied by 2 mounted gentlemen, arrived at the gate, which opened before them. The carriage drove round, and stopped at the steps, followed by the horsemen. The instant Debray had touched the ground, he was at the carriage door. He offered his hand to the Baroness, who, descending, took it with a peculiarity of manner imperceptible to everyone but Monte Cristo. But nothing escaped the Count's notice, and he observed a little note, passed with the facility that indicates frequent practice, from the hand of Madame Danglars to that of the minister's secretary. After his wife the banker descended, as pale as though he had issued from his tomb instead of his carriage. Madame Danglars threw a rapid and inquiring glance which could only be interpreted by Monte Cristo, around the courtyard, over the peristyle, and across the front of the house, Then, repressing a slight emotion, which must have been seen on her countenance if she had not kept her color, she ascended the steps, saying to Morel, "Sir, if you were a friend of mine, I should ask you if you would sell your horse." Morel smiled with an expression very like a grimace, and then turned round to Monte Cristo, as if to ask him to extricate him from his embarrassment. The Count understood him. "Ah, madam," he said, "why did you not make that request of me?" "With you, sir," replied the Baroness, "one can wish for nothing, one is so sure to obtain it. If it were so with M. Morel." "Unfortunately," replied the Count, "I am witness that M. Morel cannot give up his horse, his honor being engaged in keeping it." "How so?" "He laid a wager he would tame Medea in the space of 6 months. You understand now that if he were to get rid of the animal before the time named, he would not only lose his bet, but people would say he was afraid, and a brave captain of Spahis cannot risk this, even to gratify a pretty woman, which is, in my opinion, one of the most sacred obligations in the world." "You see my position, madam," said Morel, bestowing a grateful smile on Monte Cristo. "It seems to me," said Danglars in his coarse tone, ill-concealed by a forced smile, "that you have already got horses enough." Madame Danglars seldom allowed remarks of this kind to pass unnoticed, but to the surprise of the young people, she pretended not to hear it, and said nothing. Monte Cristo smiled at her unusual humility, and showed her 2 immense porcelain jars, over which wound marine plants, of a size and delicacy that nature alone could produce. The Baroness was astonished. "Why," said she, "you could plant one of the chestnut trees in the Tuileries inside. How can such enormous jars have been manufactured?" "Ah, madam," replied Monte Cristo, "you must not ask of us, the manufacturers of fine porcelain, such a question. It is the work of another age, constructed by the genii of earth and water." "How so? At what period can that have been?" "I do not know. I have only heard that an emperor of China had an oven built expressly, and that in this oven 12 jars like this were successively baked. 2 broke, from the heat of the fire. The other 10 were sunk 300 fathoms deep into the sea. The sea, knowing what was required of her, threw over them her weeds, encircled them with coral, and encrusted them with shells. The whole was cemented by 200 years beneath these almost impervious depths, for a revolution carried away the emperor who wished to make the trial, and only left the documents proving the manufacture of the jars and their descent into the sea. At the end of 200 years the documents were found, and they thought of bringing up the jars. Divers descended in machines, made expressly on the discovery, into the bay where they were thrown, but of 10 3 only remained, the rest having been broken by the waves. I am fond of these jars, upon which, perhaps misshapen, frightful monsters have fixed their cold, dull eyes, and in which myriads of small fish have slept, seeking a refuge from the pursuit of their enemies." Meanwhile, Danglars, who had cared little for curiosities, was mechanically tearing off the blossoms of a splendid orange tree, one after another. When he had finished with the orange tree, he began at the cactus, but this, not being so easily plucked as the orange tree, pricked him dreadfully. He shuddered, and rubbed his eyes as though awaking from a dream. "Sir," said Monte Cristo to him, "I do not recommend my pictures to you, who possess such splendid paintings, but nevertheless here are 2 by Hobbema, a Paul Potter, a Mieris, 2 by Gerard Dow, a Raphael, a Van Dyck, a Zurbrand, and 2 or 3 by Murillo, worth looking at." "Stay," said Debray, "I recognize this Hobbema." "Ah, indeed." "Yes, it was proposed for the museum." "Which, I believe, does not contain one," said Monte Cristo. "No, and yet they refused to buy it." "Why?" said Châteaurenaud. "You pretend not to know." "Because government was not rich enough." "Ah, pardon me," said Châteaurenaud. "I have heard of these things every day during the last 8 years, and I cannot understand them yet." "You will by and by," said Debray. "I think not," replied Châteaurenaud. "Major Bartolomeo Cavalcanti and Count Andrea Cavalcanti," announced Baptistin. "A black satin stock, fresh from the maker's hands, grey mustaches, a bold eye, a major's uniform, ornamented with 3 medals and 5 crosses. In fact, the thorough bearing of an old soldier. Such was the appearance of Major Bartolomeo Cavalcanti, that tender father with whom we are already acquainted. Close to him, dressed in entirely new clothes, advanced smilingly Count Andrea Cavalcanti, the dutiful son, whom we also know. The three young people were talking together. On the entrance of the newcomers, their eyes glanced from father to son, and then, naturally enough, rested on the latter, whom they began criticizing. Cavalcanti, said Debray. A fine name, said Morel. Yes, said Châteaurenaud. These Italians are well named and badly dressed. You are fastidious, Châteaurenaud, replied Debray. Those clothes are well cut and quite new. That is just what I find fault with. That gentleman appears to be well dressed for the first time in his life. Who are those gentlemen? Asked Danglars of Monte Cristo. You heard, Cavalcanti. That tells me their name and nothing else. Ah, true. You do not know the Italian nobility. The Cavalcanti are all descended from princes. Have they any fortune? An enormous one. What do they do? Try to spend it all. They have some business with you, I think, from what they told me the day before yesterday. I, indeed, invited them here today on your account. I will introduce you to them. But they appear to speak French with a very pure accent, said Danglars. The son has been educated in a college in the south, I believe near Marseilles. You will find him quite enthusiastic. Upon what subject? Asked Madame Danglars. The French ladies, madame. He has made up his mind to take a wife from Paris. A fine idea that of his, said Danglars, shrugging his shoulders. Madame Danglars looked at her husband with an expression which, at any other time, would have indicated a storm, but for the second time she controlled herself. The Baron appears thoughtful today, said Monte Cristo to her. Are they going to put him in the ministry? Not yet, I think. More likely he has been speculating on the bourse, and has lost money. And Madame de Villefort, cried Baptistin. They entered. De Villefort, notwithstanding his self-control, was visibly affected, and when Monte Cristo touched his hand, he felt it tremble. Certainly women alone know how to dissimulate, said Monte Cristo to himself, glancing at Madame Danglars, who was smiling on the procureur, and embracing his wife. After a short time, the Count saw Bertuccio, who, until then had been occupied on the other side of the house, glide into an adjoining room. He went to him. What do you want, Bertuccio? Said he. Your Excellency has not stated the number of guests. Ah, true. How many covers? Count for yourself. Is everyone here, Your Excellency? Yes. Bertuccio glanced through the door, which was ajar. The Count watched him. Good heavens, he exclaimed. What is the matter? Said the Count. That woman. Which? The one with a white dress and so many diamonds, the fair one. Madame Danglars? I do not know her name, but it is she, sir, it is she. Whom do you mean? The woman of the garden. She that was enceinte. She who was walking while she waited for. Bertuccio stood at the open door, with his eyes starting and his hair on end. Waiting for whom? Bertuccio, without answering, pointed to Villefort with something of the gesture Macbeth uses to point out Banquo. Oh, he at length muttered. Do you see? What? Who? Him. De Villefort, the king's attorney? Certainly I see him. Then I did not kill him? Really, I think you are going mad, good Bertuccio, said the Count. Then he is not dead. 30213 No, you see plainly he is not dead. Instead of striking between the 6th and 7th left ribs, as your countrymen do, you must have struck higher or lower, and life is very tenacious in these lawyers, or rather there is no truth in anything you have told me. It was a fright of the imagination, a dream of your fancy. You went to sleep full of thoughts of vengeance. They weighed heavily upon your stomach. You had the nightmare, that's all. Come, calm yourself and reckon them up, and Madame de Villefort, too, and Madame Danglars for de Châteaurenaud Debray Morel 7, Major Bartolomeo Cavalcanti, 8. 8, repeated Bertuccio. Stop. You are in a shocking hurry to be off. You forget one of my guests. Lean a little to the left. Stay. Look at Andrea Cavalcanti, the young man in a black coat, looking at Murillo's Madonna. Now he is turning. This time Bertuccio would have uttered an exclamation, had not a look from Monte Cristo silenced him. Benedetto, he muttered. Fatality. 6:30 has just struck, Bertuccio, said the Count severely. "I ordered dinner at that hour, and I do not like to wait." And he returned to his guests while Bertuccio, leaning against the wall, succeeded in reaching the dining room. 5 minutes afterwards the doors of the drawing room were thrown open, and Bertuccio appearing said, with a violent effort, "The dinner waits." The Count of Monte Cristo offered his arm to Madame de Villefort. "M. de Villefort," he said, "will you conduct the Baroness Danglars?" Villefort complied, and they passed on to the dining room. Chapter 63. The dinner. It was evident that one sentiment affected all the guests on entering the dining room. Each one asked what strange influence had brought them to this house. And yet astonished, even uneasy though they were, they still felt that they would not like to be absent. The recent events, the solitary and eccentric position of the Count, his enormous, nay, almost incredible fortune, should have made men cautious, and have altogether prevented ladies visiting a house where there was no one of their own sex to receive them. And yet curiosity had been enough to lead them to overleap the bounds of prudence and decorum. And all present, even including Cavalcanti and his son, notwithstanding the stiffness of the one and the carelessness of the other, were thoughtful, on finding themselves assembled at the house of this incomprehensible man. Madame Danglars had started when Villefort, on the Count's invitation, offered his arm, and Villefort felt that his glance was uneasy beneath his gold spectacles, when he felt the arm of the Baroness press upon his own. None of this had escaped the Count, and even by this mere contact of individuals the scene had already acquired considerable interest for an observer. M. de Villefort had on the right hand Madame Danglars, on his left Morel. The Count was seated between Madame de Villefort and Danglars. The other seats were filled by Debray, who was placed between the two Cavalcanti, and by Châteaurenaud, seated between Madame de Villefort and Morel. The repast was magnificent. Monte Cristo had endeavored completely to overturn the Parisian ideas, and to feed the curiosity as much as the appetite of his guests. It was an oriental feast that he offered to them, but of such a kind as the Arabian fairies might be supposed to prepare. Every delicious fruit that the 4 quarters of the globe could provide was heaped in vases from China and jars from Japan. Rare birds, retaining their most brilliant plumage, enormous fish, spread upon massive silver dishes, together with every wine produced in the archipelago, Asia Minor, or the Cape, sparkling in bottles, whose grotesque shape seemed to give an additional flavor to the draught. All these, like one of the displays with which Apicius of old gratified his guests, passed in review before the eyes of the astonished Parisians, who understood that it was possible to expend 1,000 louis upon a dinner for 10 persons, but only on the condition of eating pearls, like Cleopatra, or drinking refined gold, like Lorenzo de' Medici. Monte Cristo noticed the general astonishment, and began laughing and joking about it. "Gentlemen," he said, "you will admit that, when arrived at a certain degree of fortune, the superfluities of life are all that can be desired. And the ladies will allow that, after having risen to a certain eminence of position, the ideal alone can be more exalted. Now, to follow out this reasoning, what is the marvelous? That which we do not understand. What is it that we really desire? That which we cannot obtain. Now, to see things which I cannot understand, to procure impossibilities, these are the study of my life. I gratify my wishes by 2 means, my will and my money. I take as much interest in the pursuit of some whim as you do, M. Danglars, in promoting a new railway line. You, M. de Villefort, in condemning a culprit to death. You, M. Debray, in pacifying a kingdom. You, M. de Châteaurenaud, in pleasing a woman, and you, Morel, in breaking a horse that no one can ride. For example, you see these 2 fish, one brought from 50 leagues beyond St. Petersburg, the other 5 leagues from Naples. Is it not amusing to see them both on the same table?" "What are the 2 fish?" asked Danglars. M. Châteaurenaud, who has lived in Russia, will tell you the name of one, and Major Cavalcanti, who is an Italian, will tell you the name of the other. "This one is, I think, a sterlet," said Châteaurenaud. "And that one, if I mistake not, a lamprey." "Just so. Now, M. Danglars, ask these gentlemen where they are caught." "Sterlets," said Châteaurenaud, "are only found in the Volga." "And," said Cavalcanti, "I know that Lake Fusaro alone supplies lampreys of that size." "Exactly. One comes from the Volga, and the other from Lake Fusaro." "Impossible. cried all the guests simultaneously. Well, this is just what amuses me, said Monte Cristo. I am like Nero, Cupitor impossibilium. And that is what is amusing you at this moment. This fish, which seems so exquisite to you, is very likely no better than perch or salmon, but it seemed impossible to procure it, and here it is. But how could you have these fish brought to France? Oh, nothing more easy. Each fish was brought over in a cask, one filled with river herbs and weeds, the other with rushes and lake plants. They were placed in a wagon built on purpose, and thus the sterlet lived 12 days, the lamprey 8, and both were alive when my cook seized them, killing one with milk and the other with wine. You do not believe me, Danglars? I cannot help doubting, answered Danglars with his stupid smile. Baptistin, said the Count, have the other fish brought in, the sterlet and the lamprey which came in the other casks, and which are yet alive. Danglars opened his bewildered eyes. The company clapped their hands. For servants carried in 2 casks covered with aquatic plants, and in each of which was breathing a fish similar to those on the table. But why have 2 of each sort? Asked Danglars. Merely because one might have died, carelessly answered Monte Cristo. You are certainly an extraordinary man, said Danglars, and philosophers may well say it is a fine thing to be rich. And to have ideas, added Madame Danglars. Oh, do not give me credit for this, madam. It was done by the Romans who much esteemed them, and Pliny relates that they sent slaves from Ostia to Rome, who carried on their heads fish which he calls the mulus, and which, from the description, must probably be the goldfish. It was also considered a luxury to have them alive, it being an amusing sight to see them die, for when dying, they change color 3 or 4 times, and like the rainbow when it disappears, pass through all the prismatic shades, after which they were sent to the kitchen. Their agony formed part of their merit. If they were not seen alive, they were despised when dead. Yes, said Debray, but then Ostia is only a few leagues from Rome. True, said Monte Cristo, but what would be the use of living 1800 years after Lucullus, if we can do no better than he could? The 2 Cavalcanti opened their enormous eyes, but had the good sense not to say anything. All this is very extraordinary, said Châteaurenaud. Still, what I admire the most, I confess, is the marvelous promptitude with which your orders are executed. Is it not true that you only bought this house 5 or 6 days ago? Certainly not longer. Well, I am sure it is quite transformed since last week. If I remember rightly, it had another entrance, and the courtyard was paved and empty, while today we have a splendid lawn, bordered by trees which appear to be 100 years old. Why not? I am fond of grass and shade, said Monte Cristo. Yes, said Madame de Villefort. The door was towards the road before, and on the day of my miraculous escape you brought me into the house from the road, I remember. Yes, madam, said Monte Cristo, but I preferred having an entrance which would allow me to see the Bois de Boulogne over my gate. In 4 days, said Morrel. It is extraordinary. Indeed, said Châteaurenaud. It seems quite miraculous to make a new house out of an old one, for it was very old, and dull too. I recollect coming for my mother to look at it when M. de Saint-Méran advertised it for sale 2 or 3 years ago. M. de Saint-Méran? Said Madame de Villefort. Then this house belonged to M. de Saint-Méran before you bought it? It appears so, replied Monte Cristo. Is it possible that you do not know of whom you purchased it? Quite so. My steward transacts all this business for me. It is certainly 10 years since the house had been occupied, said Châteaurenaud. And it was quite melancholy to look at it, with the blinds closed, the doors locked, and the weeds in the court. Really, if the house had not belonged to the father-in-law of the procureur, one might have thought it some accursed place where a horrible crime had been committed. Villefort, who had hitherto not tasted the 3 or 4 glasses of rare wine which were placed before him, here took one, and drank it off. Monte Cristo allowed a short time to elapse, and then said, "It is singular, Baron, but the same idea came across me the first time I came here. It looks so gloomy I should never have bought it if my steward had not taken the matter into his own hands. Perhaps the fellow had been bribed by the notary." "It is probable," stammered out Villefort, trying to smile, "but I can assure you that I had nothing to do with any such proceeding. This house is part of Valentine's marriage portion, and M. de Saint-Méran wished to sell it, for if it had remained another year or two uninhabited it would have fallen to ruin. It was Morrel's turn to become pale. There was above all one room, continued Monte Cristo, very plain in appearance, hung with red damask, which I know not why, appeared to me quite dramatic. Why so? Said Danglars. Why dramatic? Can we account for instinct? Said Monte Cristo. Are there not some places where we seem to breathe sadness? Why, we cannot tell. It is a chain of recollections, an idea which carries you back to other times, to other places, which very likely have no connection with the present time and place. And there is something in this room which reminds me forcibly of the chamber of the Marquise de Ganges, 10, or Desdemona. Stay, since we have finished dinner, I will show it to you. And then we will take coffee in the garden. After dinner the play. Monte Cristo looked inquiringly at his guests. Madame de Villefort rose, Monte Cristo did the same, and the rest followed their example. Villefort and Madame Danglars remained for a moment, as if rooted to their seats. They questioned each other with vague and stupid glances. Did you hear? Said Madame Danglars. We must go, replied Villefort, offering his arm. The others, attracted by curiosity, were already scattered in different parts of the house, for they thought the visit would not be limited to the one room, and that, at the same time, they would obtain a view of the rest of the building, of which Monte Cristo had created a palace. Each one went out by the open doors. Monte Cristo waited for the two who remained. Then when they had passed he brought up the rear, and on his face was a smile, which if they could have understood it, would have alarmed them much more than a visit to the room they were about to enter. They began by walking through the apartments, many of which were fitted up in the Eastern style, with cushions and divans instead of beds, and pipes instead of furniture. The drawing rooms were decorated with the rarest pictures by the old masters, the boudoirs hung with draperies from China, of fanciful colors, fantastic design, and wonderful texture. At length they arrived at the famous room. There was nothing particular about it, excepting that, although daylight had disappeared, it was not lighted, and everything in it was old-fashioned, while the rest of the rooms had been redecorated. These two causes were enough to give it a gloomy aspect. Oh, cried Madame de Villefort, it is really frightful. Madame Danglars tried to utter a few words, but was not heard. Many observations were made, the import of which was a unanimous opinion that there was something sinister about the room. 30221M. Is it not so? Asked Monte Cristo. Look at that large clumsy bed, hung with such gloomy blood-colored drapery, and those two crayon portraits, that have faded from the dampness. Do they not seem to say, with their pale lips and staring eyes, we have seen? Villefort became livid. Madame Danglars fell into a long seat placed near the chimney. Oh, said Madame de Villefort, smiling. Are you courageous enough to sit down upon the very seat perhaps upon which the crime was committed? Madame Danglars rose suddenly. And then, said Monte Cristo, this is not all. What is there more? Said Debray, who had not failed to notice the agitation of Madame Danglars. Ah, what else is there? Said Danglars. For at present I cannot say that I have seen anything extraordinary. What do you say, M. Cavalcanti? Ah, said he, we have at Pisa, Ugolino's tower, at Ferrara, Tasso's prison, at Rimini, the room of Francesca and Paolo. Yes, but you have not this little staircase, said Monte Cristo, opening a door concealed by the drapery. Look at it, and tell me what you think of it. What a wicked-looking, crooked staircase, said Château Renaud with a smile. I do not know whether the wine of chaos produces melancholy, but certainly everything appears to me black in this house, said Debray. Ever since Valentine's dowry had been mentioned, Morrel had been silent and sad. Can you imagine, said Monte Cristo, some Othello or Abbé de Ganges, one stormy, dark night, descending these stairs step by step, carrying a load, which he wishes to hide from the sight of man, if not from God? Madame Danglars half fainted on the arm of Villefort, who was obliged to support himself against the wall. Ah, madame, cried Debray, what is the matter with you? How pale you look. It is very evident what is the matter with her, said Madame de Villefort. M. de Monte Cristo is relating horrible stories to us, doubtless intending to frighten us to death. Yes, said Villefort. Really, Count, you frighten the ladies. What is the matter? asked Debray in a whisper of Madame Danglars. Nothing, she replied with a violent effort. I want air, that is all. Will you come into the garden? Said Debray, advancing towards the back staircase. No, she answered. I would rather remain here. Are you really frightened, madame? Said Monte Cristo. Oh no, sir, said Madame Danglars, but you suppose scenes in a manner which gives them the appearance of reality. 30223M. Ah yes, said Monte Cristo smiling. It is all a matter of imagination. Why should we not imagine this the apartment of an honest mother? And this bed with red hangings, a bed visited by the goddess Lucina? And that mysterious staircase, the passage through which, not to disturb their sleep, the doctor and nurse pass, or even the father carrying the sleeping child. Here Madame Danglars, instead of being calmed by the soft picture, uttered a groan and fainted. Madame Danglars is ill, said Villefort. It would be better to take her to her carriage. Oh mon Dieu, said Monte Cristo, and I have forgotten my smelling bottle. I have mine, said Madame de Villefort, and she passed over to Monte Cristo a bottle full of the same kind of red liquid whose good properties the Count had tested on Edward. Ah, said Monte Cristo, taking it from her hand. Yes, she said. At your advice I have made the trial. And have you succeeded? I think so. Madame Danglars was carried into the adjoining room. Monte Cristo dropped a very small portion of the red liquid upon her lips. She returned to consciousness. Ah, she cried. What a frightful dream. Villefort pressed her hand to let her know it was not a dream. They looked for M. Danglars, but as he was not especially interested in poetical ideas, he had gone into the garden, and was talking with Major Cavalcanti on the projected railway from Leghorn to Florence. Monte Cristo seemed in despair. He took the arm of Madame Danglars, and conducted her into the garden, where they found Danglars taking coffee between the Cavalcanti. Really, madame, he said. Did I alarm you much? Oh no, sir, she answered. But you know things impress us differently according to the mood of our minds. Villefort forced a laugh. And then, you know, he said, an idea, a supposition is sufficient. Well, said Monte Cristo, you may believe me if you like, but it is my opinion that a crime has been committed in this house. Take care, said Madame de Villefort. The king's attorney is here. Ah, replied Monte Cristo, since that is the case, I will take advantage of his presence to make my declaration. Your declaration? Said Villefort. Yes, before witnesses. Oh, this is very interesting, said Debray. If there really has been a crime, we will investigate it. There has been a crime, said Monte Cristo. Come this way, gentlemen. Come, M. Villefort, for a declaration to be available, should be made before the competent authorities. He then took Villefort's arm, and at the same time, holding that of Madame Danglars under his own, he dragged the procureur to the plantain tree, where the shade was thickest. All the other guests followed. Stay, said Monte Cristo, here in this very spot, and he stamped upon the ground. I had the earth dug up and fresh mold put in, to refresh these old trees. Well, my man digging found a box, or rather, the iron work of a box, in the midst of which was the skeleton of a newly born infant. 30225M. Monte Cristo felt the arm of Madame Danglars stiffen, while that of Villefort trembled. A newly born infant, repeated Debray. This affair becomes serious. Well, said Châteaurenaud, I was not wrong just now then, when I said that houses had souls and faces like men, and that their exteriors carried the impress of their characters. This house was gloomy because it was remorseful. It was remorseful because it concealed a crime. Who said it was a crime? Asked Villefort, with a last effort. How? Is it not a crime to bury a living child in a garden? Cried Monte Cristo. And pray what do you call such an action? But who said it was buried alive? Why bury it there if it were dead? This garden has never been a cemetery. What is done to infanticides in this country? Asked Major Cavalcanti innocently. Oh, their heads are soon cut off, said Danglars. Ah, indeed, said Cavalcanti. I think so. Am I not right, M. de Villefort? Asked Monte Cristo. Yes, Count, replied Villefort, in a voice now scarcely human. Monte Cristo, seeing that the two persons for whom he had prepared this scene could scarcely endure it, and not wishing to carry it too far, said, Come, gentlemen, some coffee, we seem to have forgotten it, and he conducted the guests back to the table on the lawn. Indeed, Count, said Madame Danglars, I am ashamed to own it, but all your frightful stories have so upset me, that I must beg you to let me sit down, and she fell into a chair. Monte Cristo bowed, and went to Madame de Villefort. I think Madame Danglars again requires your bottle, he said. But before Madame de Villefort could reach her friend, the procureur had found time to whisper to Madame Danglars, I must speak to you. When? Tomorrow. Where? In my office or in the court if you like. That is the surest place. I will be there. At this moment Madame de Villefort approached. Thanks, my dear friend, said Madame Danglars, trying to smile. It is over now, and I am much better. Chapter 64. The Beggar. The evening passed on. Madame de Villefort expressed a desire to return to Paris, which Madame Danglars had not dared to do, notwithstanding the uneasiness she experienced. On his wife's request, M. de Villefort was the first to give the signal of departure. He offered a seat in his landau to Madame Danglars, that she might be under the care of his wife. As for M. Danglars, absorbed in an interesting conversation with M. Cavalcanti, he paid no attention to anything that was passing. While Monte Cristo had begged the smelling bottle of Madame de Villefort, he had noticed the approach of Villefort to Madame Danglars, and he soon guessed all that had passed between them, though the words had been uttered in so low a voice as hardly to be heard by Madame Danglars. Without opposing their arrangements, he allowed Morel, Châteaurenaud, and Debray to leave on horseback, and the ladies in M. de Villefort's carriage. Danglars, more and more delighted with Major Cavalcanti, had offered him a seat in his carriage. Andrea Cavalcanti found his tilbury waiting at the door. The groom, in every respect a caricature of the English fashion, was standing on tiptoe to hold a large iron-grey horse. Andrea had spoken very little during dinner. He was an intelligent lad, and he feared to utter some absurdity before so many grand people, amongst whom, with dilating eyes, he saw the king's attorney. Then he had been seized upon by Danglars, who, with a rapid glance at the stiff-necked old major and his modest son, and taking into consideration the hospitality of the count, made up his mind that he was in the society of some nabob come to Paris to finish the worldly education of his heir. He contemplated with unspeakable delight the large diamond which shone on the major's little finger. For the major, like a prudent man, in case of any accident happening to his banknotes, had immediately converted them into an available asset. Then, after dinner, on the pretext of business, he questioned the father and son upon their mode of living. And the father and son, previously informed that it was through Danglars the one was to receive his 48,000 francs, and the other 50,000 livres annually, were so full of affability that they would have shaken hands even with the banker's servants, so much did their gratitude need an object to expend itself upon. One thing above all the rest heightened the respect, nay almost the veneration, of Danglars for Cavalcanti. The latter, faithful to the principle of Horace, nil admirari, had contented himself with showing his knowledge by declaring in what lake the best lampreys were caught. Then he had eaten some without saying a word more. Danglars, therefore, concluded that such luxuries were common at the table of the illustrious descendant of the Cavalcanti, who most likely in Lucca fed upon trout brought from Switzerland, and lobsters sent from England, by the same means used by the Count to bring the lampreys from Lake Fusaro, and the sterlet from the Volga. Thus it was with much politeness of manner that he heard Cavalcanti pronounce these words. Tomorrow, sir, I shall have the honor of waiting upon you on business. And I, sir, said Danglars, shall be most happy to receive you. Upon which he offered to take Cavalcanti in his carriage to the Hôtel des Princes, if it would not be depriving him of the company of his son. To this Cavalcanti replied by saying that for some time past his son had lived independently of him, that he had his own horses and carriages, and that not having come together, it would not be difficult for them to leave separately. The major seated himself, therefore, by the side of Danglars, who was more and more charmed with the ideas of order and economy which ruled this man, and yet who, being able to allow his son 60,000 francs a year, might be supposed to possess a fortune of 500,000 or 600,000 livres. As for Andrea, he began, by way of showing off, to scold his groom, who instead of bringing the tilbury to the steps of the house, had taken it to the outer door, thus giving him the trouble of walking 30 steps to reach it. The groom heard him with humility, took the bit of the impatient animal with his left hand, and with the right held out the reins to Andrea, who, taking them from him, rested his polished boot lightly on the step. At that moment a hand touched his shoulder. The young man turned round, thinking that Danglars or Monte Cristo had forgotten something they wished to tell him, and had returned just as they were starting. But instead of either of these, he saw nothing but a strange face, sunburnt, and encircled by a beard, with eyes brilliant as carbuncles, and a smile upon the mouth which displayed a perfect set of white teeth, pointed and sharp as the wolf's or jackal's. A red handkerchief encircled his grey head. Torn and filthy garments covered his large bony limbs, which seemed as though, like those of a skeleton, they would rattle as he walked. And the hand with which he leaned upon the young man's shoulder, and which was the first thing Andrea saw, seemed of gigantic size. 30229M. Did the young man recognize that face by the light of the lantern in his tilbury? Or was he merely struck with the horrible appearance of his interrogator? We cannot say, but only relate the fact that he shuddered and stepped back suddenly. "What do you want of me?" he asked. "Pardon me, my friend, if I disturb you," said the man with the red handkerchief, "but I want to speak to you." "You have no right to beg at night," said the groom, endeavoring to rid his master of the troublesome intruder. "I am not begging, my fine fellow," said the unknown to the servant, with so ironical an expression of the eye, and so frightful a smile, that he withdrew. "I only wish to say 2 or 3 words to your master, who gave me a commission to execute about a fortnight ago." "Come," said Andrea, with sufficient nerve for his servant not to perceive his agitation. "What do you want? Speak quickly, friend." The man said in a low voice, I wish you to spare me the walk back to Paris. I am very tired, and as I have not eaten so good a dinner as you, I can scarcely stand." The young man shuddered at this strange familiarity. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me what you want." "Well then, I want you to take me up in your fine carriage, and carry me back." Andrea turned pale, but said nothing. "Yes," said the man, thrusting his hands into his pockets, and looking impudently at the youth. "I have taken the women to my head. Do you understand, Master Benedetto?" At this name, no doubt, the young man reflected a little, for he went towards his groom, saying, "This man is right. I did indeed charge him with a commission, the result of which he must tell me. Walk to the barrier, there take a cab, that you may not be too late." The surprised groom retired. "Let me at least reach a shady spot," said Andrea. "Oh, as for that, I'll take you to a splendid place," said the man with the handkerchief. And taking the horse's bit he led the tilbury where it was certainly impossible for anyone to witness the honor that Andrea conferred upon him. "Don't think I want the glory of riding in your fine carriage," said he. "Oh no, it's only because I am tired, and also because I have a little business to talk over with you." "Come, step in," said the young man. It was a pity this scene had not occurred in daylight, for it was curious to see this rascal throwing himself heavily down on the cushion beside the young and elegant driver of the tilbury. Andrea drove past the last house in the village without saying a word to his companion, who smiled complacently, as though well pleased to find himself traveling in so comfortable a vehicle. Once out of Auteuil, Andrea looked around, in order to assure himself that he could neither be seen nor heard, and then, stopping the horse and crossing his arms before the man, he asked, "Now tell me why you come to disturb my tranquility. Let me ask you why you deceived me?" "How have I deceived you?" "How do you ask? When we parted at the Pont du Var, you told me you were going to travel through Piedmont and Tuscany, but instead of that, you come to Paris. How does that annoy you?" "It does not. On the contrary, I think it will answer my purpose." "So," said Andrea, "you are speculating upon me? What fine words he uses! I warn you, Master Cataris, that you are mistaken." "Well, well, don't be angry, my boy. You know well enough what it is to be unfortunate, and misfortunes make us jealous. I thought you were earning a living in Tuscany or Piedmont by acting as Ficino or Cicerone, and I pitied you sincerely, as I would a child of my own. You know I always did call you my child." "Come, come, what then?" "Patience, patience. I am patient, but go on." "All at once I see you pass through the barrier with a groom, a tilbury, and fine new clothes. You must have discovered a mine, or else become a stockbroker." So that, as you confess, you are jealous? No, I am pleased, so pleased that I wish to congratulate you. But as I am not quite properly dressed, I chose my opportunity, that I might not compromise you. Yes, and a fine opportunity you have chosen, exclaimed Andrea. You speak to me before my servant. How can I help that, my boy? I speak to you when I can catch you. You have a quick horse, a light tilbury. You are naturally as slippery as an eel. If I had missed you tonight, I might not have had another chance. You see, I do not conceal myself. You are lucky. I wish I could say as much, for I do conceal myself. And then I was afraid you would not recognize me, but you did, added Catullus with his unpleasant smile. It was very polite of you. Come, said Andrea. What do you want? You do not speak affectionately to me, Benedetto, my old friend. That is not right. Take care, or I may become troublesome. This menace smothered the young man's passion. He urged the horse again into a trot. You should not speak so to an old friend like me, Catullus, as you said just now. You are a native of Marseilles, I am. Do you know then now what you are? No, but I was brought up in Corsica. You are old and obstinate, I am young and willful. Between people like us threats are out of place, everything should be amicably arranged. Is it my fault if fortune, which has frowned on you, has been kind to me? Fortune has been kind to you, then? Your tilbury, your groom, your clothes, are not then hired? Good, so much the better, said Catullus, his eyes sparkling with avarice. Oh, you knew that well enough before speaking to me, said Andrea, becoming more and more excited. If I had been wearing a handkerchief like yours on my head, rags on my back, and worn-out shoes on my feet, you would not have known me. You wrong me, my boy. Now I have found you, nothing prevents my being as well dressed as anyone, knowing, as I do, the goodness of your heart. If you have 2 coats, you will give me one of them. I used to divide my soup and beans with you when you were hungry. True, said Andrea. What an appetite you used to have. Is it as good now? Oh yes, replied Andrea, laughing. How did you come to be dining with that prince whose house you have just left? He is not a prince, simply a count. A count, and a rich one too, eh? Yes, but you had better not have anything to say to him, for he is not a very good-tempered gentleman. Oh, be easy. I have no design upon your count, and you shall have him all to yourself. But, said Catullus, again smiling with the disagreeable expression he had before assumed, you must pay for it. You understand? Well, what do you want? I think that with 100 francs a month. Well, I could live. Upon 100 francs. Come, you understand me, but that with 150 francs I should be quite happy. Here are 200, said Andrea, and he placed 10 gold louis in the hand of Catullus. 30233 M. Good, said Catullus. Apply to the steward on the first day of every month, and you will receive the same sum. There, now again you degrade me. How so? By making me apply to the servants, when I want to transact business with you alone. Well, be it so then. Take it from me then. And so long at least as I receive my income, you shall be paid yours. Come, come. I always said you were a fine fellow, and it is a blessing when good fortune happens to such as you. But tell me all about it. Why do you wish to know? Asked Cavalcanti. What? Do you again defy me? No, the fact is I have found my father. What? A real father? Yes, so long as he pays me. You'll honor and believe him, that's right. What is his name? Major Cavalcanti. Is he pleased with you? So far I have appeared to answer his purpose. And who found this father for you? The Count of Monte Cristo. The man whose house you have just left. Yes. I wish you would try and find me a situation with him as grandfather, since he holds the money chest. Well, I will mention you to him. Meanwhile, what are you going to do? Yes, you. It is very kind of you to trouble yourself about me. Since you interest yourself in my affairs, I think it is now my turn to ask you some questions. Ah, true. Well, I shall rent a room in some respectable house, wear a decent coat, shave every day, and go and read the papers in a cafe. Then, in the evening, I shall go to the theater. I shall look like some retired baker. That is what I want. Come, if you will only put this scheme into execution, and be steady, nothing could be better. Do you think so, M. Bossuet? And you? What will you become? A peer of France? Ah, said Andrea. Who knows? Major Cavalcanti is already one, perhaps, but then hereditary rank is abolished. No politics, Catullus. And now that you have all you want, and that we understand each other, jump down from the tilbury and disappear. Not at all, my good friend. How? Not at all. Why, just think for a moment. With this red handkerchief on my head, with scarcely any shoes, no papers, and 10 gold Napoleons in my pocket, without reckoning what was there before, making in all about 200 francs, why, I should certainly be arrested at the barriers. Then, to justify myself, I should say that you gave me the money. This would cause inquiries. It would be found that I left Toulon without giving due notice, and I should then be escorted back to the shores of the Mediterranean. Then I should become simply number 106, and goodbye to my dream of resembling the retired baker. No, no, my boy, I prefer remaining honorably in the capital. Andrea scowled. Certainly, as he had himself owned, the reputed son of Major Cavalcanti was a willful fellow. He drew up for a minute, threw a rapid glance around him, and then his hand fell instantly into his pocket, where it began playing with a pistol. But meanwhile Catullus, who had never taken his eyes off his companion, passed his hand behind his back, and opened a long Spanish knife, which he always carried with him, to be ready in case of need. The two friends, as we see, were worthy of and understood one another. Andrea's hand left his pocket inoffensively, and was carried up to the red mustache, which it played with for some time. Good Catullus, he said, how happy you will be. I will do my best, said the innkeeper of the Pont du Gard, shutting up his knife. Well then we will go into Paris. But how will you pass through the barrier without exciting suspicion? It seems to me that you are in more danger riding than on foot. Wait, said Catullus, we shall see. He then took the greatcoat with the large collar, which the groom had left behind in the tilbury, and put it on his back. Then he took off Cavalcanti's hat, which he placed upon his own head, and finally he assumed the careless attitude of a servant whose master drives himself. But tell me, said Andrea, am I to remain bareheaded? Pooh, said Catullus, it is so windy that your hat can easily appear to have blown off. Come, come, enough of this, said Cavalcanti. What are you waiting for? Said Catullus. I hope I am not the cause. Hush, said Andrea. They passed the barrier without accident. At the first cross street Andrea stopped his horse, and Catullus leaped out. Well, said Andrea, my servant's coat and my hat? Ah, said Catullus, you would not like me to risk taking cold? But what am I to do? You? Oh, you are young while I am beginning to get old. Au revoir, Benedetto. And running into a court he disappeared. Alas, said Andrea, sighing, one cannot be completely happy in this world. Chapter 65. A conjugal scene. At the place Louis XV. The three young people separated. That is to say, Morel went to the boulevards, Châteaurenaud to the Pont de la Révolution, and Debray to the quay. Most probably Morel and Châteaurenaud returned to their domestic hearths, as they say in the gallery of the Chamber in well-turned speeches, and in the theatre of the Rue Richelieu in well-written pieces. But it was not the case with Debray. When he reached the wicket of the Louvre he turned to the left, galloped across the Carrousel, passed through the Rue Saint-Roch, and issuing from the Rue de la Michodière he arrived at M. Danglars' door just at the same time that Villefort's landau, after having deposited him and his wife at the Faubourg Saint-Honoré, stopped to leave the Baroness at her own house. Debray, with the air of a man familiar with the house, entered first into the court, threw his bridle into the hands of a footman, and returned to the door to receive Madame Danglars, to whom he offered his arm, to conduct her to her apartments. The gate once closed, and Debray and the Baroness alone in the court, he asked, "What was the matter with you, Hermine? And why were you so affected at that story, or rather fable, which the Count related?" "Because I have been in such shocking spirits all the evening, my friend," said the Baroness. "No, Hermine," replied Debray, "you cannot make me believe that. On the contrary, you were in excellent spirits when you arrived at the Count's. M. Danglars was disagreeable, certainly, but I know how much you care for his ill humor. Someone has vexed you. I will allow no one to annoy you." "You are deceived, Lucien, I assure you," replied Madame Danglars. "And what I have told you is really the case," added to the ill humor you remarked, but which I did not think it worthwhile to allude to. It was evident that Madame Danglars was suffering from that nervous irritability which women frequently cannot account for even to themselves, or that, as Debray had guessed, she had experienced some secret agitation that she would not acknowledge to anyone. Being a man who knew that the former of these symptoms was one of the inherent penalties of womanhood, he did not then press his inquiries, but waited for a more appropriate opportunity when he should again interrogate her, or receive an avowal proprio motu. At the door of her apartment the Baroness met Mademoiselle Cornélie, her confidential maid. "What is my daughter doing?" asked Madame Danglars. "She practiced all the evening and then went to bed," replied Mademoiselle Cornélie. "Yet I think I hear her piano." "It is Mademoiselle Louise d'Armilly, who is playing while Mademoiselle Danglars is in bed." "Well," said Madame Danglars, "come and undress me." They entered the bedroom. Debray stretched himself upon a large couch, and Madame Danglars passed into her dressing-room with Mademoiselle Cornélie. "My dear M. Lucien," said Madame Danglars through the door, "you are always complaining that Eugenie will not address a word to you." "Madame," said Lucien, playing with a little dog, who, recognizing him as a friend of the house, expected to be caressed, "I am not the only one who makes similar complaints. I think I heard Morcerf say that he could not extract a word from his betrothed." "True," said Madame Danglars, "yet I think this will all pass off, and that you will one day see her enter your study." "My study?" "At least that of the minister." "Why so?" "To ask for an engagement at the opera. Really, I never saw such an infatuation for music. It is quite ridiculous for a young lady of fashion." Debray smiled. "Well," said he, "let her come with your consent and that of the Baron, and we will try and give her an engagement, though we are very poor to pay such talent as hers." "Go, Cornélie," said Madame Danglars. "I do not require you any longer." Cornélie obeyed, and the next minute Madame Danglars left her room in a charming loose dress, and came and sat down close to Debray. Then she began thoughtfully to caress the little spaniel. Lucien looked at her for a moment in silence. "Come, Hermine," he said after a short time, "answer candidly. Something vexes you, is it not so?" 30239M. "Nothing," answered the Baroness. And yet, as she could scarcely breathe, she rose and went towards a looking-glass. "I am frightful tonight," she said. Debray rose, smiling, and was about to contradict the Baroness upon this latter point, when the door opened suddenly. M. Danglars appeared. Debray reseated himself. At the noise of the door Madame Danglars turned round, and looked upon her husband with an astonishment she took no trouble to conceal. "Good evening, madame," said the banker. "Good evening, M. Debray." Probably the Baroness thought this unexpected visit signified a desire to make up for the sharp words he had uttered during the day. Assuming a dignified air, she turned round to Debray, without answering her husband. "Read me something, M. Debray," she said. Debray, who was slightly disturbed at this visit, recovered himself when he saw the calmness of the Baroness, and took up a book marked by a mother-of-pearl knife inlaid with gold. "Excuse me," said the banker, "but you will tire yourself, Baroness, by such late hours, and M. Debray lives some distance from here." Debray was petrified, not only to hear Danglars speak so calmly and politely, but because it was apparent that beneath outward politeness there really lurked a determined spirit of opposition to anything his wife might wish to do. The Baroness was also surprised, and showed her astonishment by a look which would doubtless have had some effect upon her husband if he had not been intently occupied with the paper, where he was looking to see the closing stock quotations. The result was that the proud look entirely failed of its purpose. "M. Lucien," said the Baroness, "I assure you I have no desire to sleep, and that I have 1,000 things to tell you this evening, which you must listen to, even though you slept while hearing me." "I am at your service, madame," replied Lucien coldly. "My dear M. Debray," said the banker, "do not kill yourself tonight listening to the follies of Madame Danglars, for you can hear them as well tomorrow, but I claim tonight and will devote it, if you will allow me, to talk over some serious matters with my wife." This time the blow was so well aimed, and hit so directly, that Lucien and the Baroness were staggered, and they interrogated each other with their eyes, as if to seek help against this aggression, but the irresistible will of the master of the house prevailed, and the husband was victorious. Do not think I wish to turn you out, my dear Debray, continued Danglars. Oh no, not at all. An unexpected occurrence forces me to ask my wife to have a little conversation with me. It is so rarely I make such a request. I am sure you cannot grudge it to me. Debray muttered something, bowed and went out, knocking himself against the edge of the door, like Nathan in Athalie. It is extraordinary, he said, when the door was closed behind him. How easily these husbands, whom we ridicule, gain an advantage over us. 30241M. Lucien having left, Danglars took his place on the sofa, closed the open book, and placing himself in a dreadfully dictatorial attitude, he began playing with the dog, but the animal, not liking him as well as Debray, and attempting to bite him, Danglars seized him by the skin of his neck and threw him upon a couch on the other side of the room. The animal uttered a cry during the transit, but arrived at its destination, it crouched behind the cushions, and stupefied at such unusual treatment remained silent and motionless. Do you know, sir, asked the Baroness, that you are improving? Generally you are only rude, but tonight you are brutal. It is because I am in a worse humor than usual, replied Danglars. Hermine looked at the banker with supreme disdain. These glances frequently exasperated the pride of Danglars, but this evening he took no notice of them. And what have I to do with your ill humor? Said the Baroness, irritated at the impassibility of her husband. Do these things concern me? Keep your ill humor at home in your money boxes, or, since you have clerks whom you pay, vent it upon them. Not so, replied Danglars. Your advice is wrong, so I shall not follow it. My money boxes are my Pactolus, as I think M. de Moustier says, and I will not retard its course, or disturb its calm. My clerks are honest men, who earn my fortune, whom I pay much below their deserts, if I may value them according to what they bring in. Therefore I shall not get into a passion with them. Those with whom I will be in a passion are those who eat my dinners, mount my horses, and exhaust my fortune. And pray who are the persons who exhaust your fortune? Explain yourself more clearly, I beg, sir. Oh, make yourself easy. I am not speaking riddles, and you will soon know what I mean. The people who exhaust my fortune are those who draw out 700,000 francs in the course of an hour. I do not understand you, sir, said the Baroness, trying to disguise the agitation of her voice and the flush of her face. You understand me perfectly, on the contrary, said Danglars. But if you will persist, I will tell you that I have just lost 700,000 francs upon the Spanish loan. And pray, asked the Baroness, am I responsible for this loss? Why not? Is it my fault you have lost 700,000 francs? Certainly it is not mine. Once for all, sir, replied the Baroness sharply. I tell you I will not hear cash named. It is a style of language I never heard in the house of my parents or in that of my first husband. Oh, I can well believe that, for neither of them was worth a penny. The better reason for my not being conversant with the slang of the bank, which is here dinning in my ears from morning to night. That noise of jingling crowns, which are constantly being counted and recounted, is odious to me. I only know one thing I dislike more, which is the sound of your voice. Really, said Danglars. Well, this surprises me, for I thought you took the liveliest interest in all my affairs. 30243M. What could put such an idea into your head? Yourself. Ah, what next? Most assuredly. I should like to know upon what occasion. Oh mon Dieu, that is very easily done. Last February you were the first who told me of the Haitian funds. You had dreamed that a ship had entered the harbor at Le Havre, that this ship brought news that a payment we had looked upon as lost was going to be made. I know how clear-sighted your dreams are. I therefore purchased immediately as many shares as I could of the Haitian debt, and I gained 400,000 francs by it, of which 100,000 have been honestly paid to you. You spent it as you pleased. That was your business. In March there was a question about a grant to a railway. 3 companies presented themselves, each offering equal securities. You told me that your instinct, and although you pretend to know nothing about speculations, I think on the contrary, that your comprehension is very clear upon certain affairs. Well, you told me that your instinct led you to believe the grant would be given to the company called the Southern. I bought 2/3 of the shares of that company, as you had foreseen. The shares trebled in value, and I picked up 1 million, from which 250,000 francs were paid to you for pin money. How have you spent this 250,000 francs? It is no business of mine." "When are you coming to the point?" cried the Baroness, shivering with anger and impatience. "Patience, madam, I am coming to it." "That's fortunate. In April you went to dine at the minister's. You heard a private conversation respecting Spanish affairs, on the expulsion of Don Carlos. I bought some Spanish shares. The expulsion took place and I pocketed 600,000 francs the day Charles V repassed the Bidasoa. Of these 600,000 francs you took 50,000 crowns. They were yours, you disposed of them according to your fancy, and I asked no questions, but it is not the less true that you have this year received 500,000 livres. Well, sir, and what then? Ah yes, it was just after this that you spoiled everything. Really, your manner of speaking. It expresses my meaning, and that is all I want. Well, 3 days after that you talked politics with M. Debray, and you fancied from his words that Don Carlos had returned to Spain. Well, I sold my shares, the news got out, and I no longer sold. I gave them away. Next day I find the news was false, and by this false report I have lost 700,000 francs. Well, since I gave you 1/4 of my gains, I think you owe me 1/4 of my losses. The 1/4 of 700,000 francs is 175,000 francs. What you say is absurd, and I cannot see why M. Debray's name is mixed up in this affair. Because if you do not possess the 175,000 francs I reclaim, you must have lent them to your friends, and M. Debray is one of your friends. 30245 M. For shame, exclaimed the Baroness. Oh, let us have no gestures, no screams, no modern drama, or you will oblige me to tell you that I see Debray leave here, pocketing the whole of the 500,000 livres you have handed over to him this year, while he smiles to himself, saying that he has found what the most skillful players have never discovered. That is, a roulette where he wins without playing, and is no loser when he loses. The Baroness became enraged. Wretch, she cried. Will you dare to tell me you did not know what you now reproach me with? I do not say that I did know it, and I do not say that I did not know it. I merely tell you to look into my conduct during the last 4 years that we have ceased to be husband and wife, and see whether it has not always been consistent. Some time after our rupture, you wished to study music, under the celebrated baritone who made such a successful appearance at the Theatre Italien. At the same time I felt inclined to learn dancing of the danseuses who acquired such a reputation in London. This cost me, on your account and mine, 100,000 francs. I said nothing, for we must have peace in the house, and 100,000 francs for a lady and gentleman to be properly instructed in music and dancing are not too much. Well, you soon become tired of singing, and you take a fancy to study diplomacy with the minister's secretary. You understand, it signifies nothing to me so long as you pay for your lessons out of your own cash box. But today I find you are drawing on mine, and that your apprenticeship may cost me 700,000 francs per month. Stop there, madam, for this cannot last. Either the diplomatist must give his lessons gratis, and I will tolerate him, or he must never set his foot again in my house. Do you understand, madam? Oh, this is too much, cried Hermine, choking. You are worse than despicable. But, continued Danglars, I find you did not even pause there. Insults. You are right. Let us leave these facts alone, and reason coolly. I have never interfered in your affairs excepting for your good. Treat me in the same way. You say you have nothing to do with my cash box. Be it so. Do as you like with your own. But do not fill or empty mine. Besides, how do I know that this was not a political trick, that the minister, enraged at seeing me in the opposition, and jealous of the popular sympathy I excite, has not concerted with them? Debray to ruin me? A probable thing. Why not? Who ever heard of such an occurrence as this? A false telegraphic dispatch. It is almost impossible for wrong signals to be made as they were in the last 2 telegrams. It was done on purpose for me. I am sure of it. Sir, said the Baroness humbly, are you not aware that the man employed there was dismissed, that they talked of going to law with him, that orders were issued to arrest him, and that this order would have been put into execution if he had not escaped by flight? which proves that he was either mad or guilty. It was a mistake. Yes, which made fools laugh, which caused the minister to have a sleepless night, which has caused the minister's secretaries to blacken several sheets of paper, but which has cost me 700,000 francs. But sir, said Hermine suddenly, if all this is, as you say, caused by M. Debray, why, instead of going direct to him, do you come and tell me of it? Why, to accuse the man, do you address the woman? Do I know M. Debray? Do I wish to know him? Do I wish to know that he gives advice? Do I wish to follow it? Do I speculate? No, you do all this, not I. Still it seems to me that as you profit by it. Danglars shrugged his shoulders. Foolish creature, he exclaimed. Women fancy they have talent because they have managed 2 or 3 intrigues without being the talk of Paris. But know that if you had even hidden your irregularities from your husband, who has but the commencement of the art, for generally husbands will not see, you would then have been but a faint imitation of most of your friends among the women of the world. But it has not been so with me. I see and always have seen, during the last 16 years. You may, perhaps, have hidden a thought, but not a step, not an action, not a fault has escaped me, while you flattered yourself upon your address, and firmly believed you had deceived me. What has been the result? That, thanks to my pretended ignorance, there is none of your friends, from M. de Villefort to M. Debray, who has not trembled before me. There is not one who has not treated me as the master of the house, the only title I desire with respect to you. There is not one, in fact, who would have dared to speak of me as I have spoken of them this day. I will allow you to make me hateful, but I will prevent your rendering me ridiculous. And above all, I forbid you to ruin me. The Baroness had been tolerably composed until the name of Villefort had been pronounced, but then she became pale, and rising, as if touched by a spring, she stretched out her hands as though conjuring an apparition. She then took 2 or 3 steps towards her husband, as though to tear the secret from him, of which he was ignorant, or which he withheld from some odious calculation. Odious, as all his calculations were. M. de Villefort. What do you mean? I mean that M. de Nargonne, your first husband, being neither a philosopher nor a banker, or perhaps being both, and seeing there was nothing to be got out of a king's attorney, died of grief or anger at finding, after an absence of 9 months, that you had been en Saint 6. I am brutal. I not only allow it but boast of it. It is one of the reasons of my success in commercial business. Why did he kill himself instead of you? Because he had no cash to save. My life belongs to my cash. M. Debray has made me lose 700,000 francs. Let him bear his share of the loss, and we will go on as before. If not, let him become bankrupt for the 250,000 livres, and do as all bankrupts do, disappear. He is a charming fellow, I allow, when his news is correct, but when it is not, there are 50 others in the world who would do better than he. Madame Danglars was rooted to the spot. She made a violent effort to reply to this last attack, but she fell upon a chair thinking of Villefort, of the dinner scene, of the strange series of misfortunes which had taken place in her house during the last few days, and changed the usual calm of her establishment to a scene of scandalous debate. Danglars did not even look at her, though she did her best to faint. He shut the bedroom door after him, without adding another word, and returned to his apartments. And when Madame Danglars recovered from her half-fainting condition, she could almost believe that she had had a disagreeable dream. Chapter 66. Matrimonial Projects. The day following this scene, at the hour Debray usually chose to pay a visit to Madame Danglars on his way to his office, his coupe did not appear. At this time, that is about 12:30, Madame Danglars ordered her carriage and went out. Danglars, hidden behind a curtain, watched the departure he had been waiting for. He gave orders that he should be informed as soon as Madame Danglars appeared, but at 2 o'clock she had not returned. He then called for his horses, drove to the chamber, and inscribed his name to speak against the budget. From 12 to 2 o'clock Danglars had remained in his study, unsealing his dispatches, and becoming more and more sad every minute, heaping figure upon figure, and receiving, among other visits, one from Major Cavalcanti, who, as stiff and exact as ever, presented himself precisely at the hour named the night before, to terminate his business with the banker. On leaving the chamber, Danglars, who had shown violent marks of agitation during the sitting, and been more bitter than ever against the ministry, re-entered his carriage, and told the coachman to drive to the Avenue de Champs-Élysées, number 30. Monte Cristo was at home. Only he was engaged with someone, and begged Danglars to wait for a moment in the drawing-room. While the banker was waiting in the anteroom, the door opened, and a man dressed as an abbé and doubtless more familiar with the house than he was, came in and instead of waiting, merely bowed, passed on to the farther apartments, and disappeared. A minute after the door by which the priest had entered reopened, and Monte Cristo appeared. "Pardon me," said he, "my dear Baron, but one of my friends, the Abbé Busoni, whom you perhaps saw pass by, has just arrived in Paris. Not having seen him for a long time, I could not make up my mind to leave him sooner, so I hope this will be sufficient reason for my having made you wait." "Nay," said Danglars, "it is my fault. I have chosen my visit at a wrong time, and will retire." "Not at all. On the contrary, be seated. But what is the matter with you? You look careworn. Really, you alarm me. Melancholy in a capitalist, like the appearance of a comet, presages some misfortune to the world." "I have been in ill luck for several days," said Danglars, "and I have heard nothing but bad news." "Ah, indeed," said Monte Cristo. "Have you had another fall at the Bourse?" "No, I am safe for a few days at least. I am only annoyed about a bankrupt of Trieste." "Really? Does it happen to be Jacopo Manfredi?" "Exactly so. Imagine a man who has transacted business with me for I don't know how long, to the amount of 800,000 or 900,000 francs during the year. Never a mistake or delay. A fellow who paid like a prince. Well, I was $1 million in advance with him, and now my fine Jacopo Manfredi suspends payment. Really, it is an unheard of fatality. I draw upon him for 600,000 francs. My bills are returned unpaid, and more than that, I hold bills of exchange signed by him to the value of 400,000 francs, payable at his correspondence in Paris at the end of this month. Today is the 30th. I present them, but my correspondent has disappeared. This, with my Spanish affairs, made a pretty end to the month." "Then you really lost by that affair in Spain?" "Yes, only 700,000 francs out of my cash box, nothing more." "Why, how could you make such a mistake, such an old stager?" "Oh, it is all my wife's fault. She dreamed Don Carlos had returned to Spain. She believes in dreams. It is magnetism, she says, and when she dreams a thing it is sure to happen, she assures me. On this conviction I allow her to speculate, she having her bank and her stockbroker. She speculated and lost. It is true she speculates with her own money, not mine. Nevertheless, you can understand that when 700,000 francs leave the wife's pocket, the husband always finds it out." "But do you mean to say you have not heard of this? Why, the thing has made a tremendous noise." "Yes, I heard it spoken of, but I did not know the details. And then no one can be more ignorant than I am of the affairs in the Bourse." 30251M. "Then you do not speculate?" "I? How could I speculate when I already have so much trouble in regulating my income? I should be obliged, besides my steward, to keep a clerk and a boy. But touching these Spanish affairs, I think that the Baroness did not dream the whole of the Don Carlos matter. The papers said something about it, did they not?" "Then you believe the papers?" "I? Not the least in the world. Only I fancied that the honest Massager was an exception to the rule, and that it only announced telegraphic dispatches." "Well, that's what puzzles me," replied Danglars. "The news of the return of Don Carlos was brought by telegraph." "So that," said Monte Cristo, "you have lost nearly 1,700,000 francs this month." "Not nearly, indeed. That is exactly my loss." "Diable," said Monte Cristo compassionately. "It is a hard blow for a third-rate fortune." "Third-rate," said Danglars, rather humble. "What do you mean by that?" "Certainly," continued Monte Cristo, "I make 3 assortments in fortune: first-rate, second-rate, and third-rate fortunes. I call those first-rate which are composed of treasures one possesses under one's hand, such as mines, lands, and funded property, in such states as France, Austria, and England, provided these treasures and property form a total of about 100 millions. I call those second-rate fortunes, that are gained by manufacturing enterprises, joint stock companies, viceroyalties, and principalities, not drawing more than 1,500,000 francs, the whole forming a capital of about 50 millions. Finally, I call those third-rate fortunes, which are composed of a fluctuating capital, dependent upon the will of others, or upon chances which a bankruptcy involves or a false telegram shakes, such as banks' speculations of the day. In fact, all operations under the influence of greater or less mischances, the whole bringing in a real or fictitious capital of about 15 millions. I think this is about your position, is it not? Confound it, yes, replied Danglars. The result then of 6 more such months as this would be to reduce the third-rate house to despair. Oh, said Danglars, becoming very pale, how you are running on. Let us imagine 7 such months, continued Monte Cristo, in the same tone. Tell me, have you ever thought that 7 times 1,700,000 francs make nearly 12 millions? No, you have not. Well, you are right, for if you indulged in such reflections, you would never risk your principal, which is to the speculator what the skin is to civilized man. We have our clothes, some more splendid than others. This is our credit, but when a man dies he has only his skin. In the same way, on retiring from business, you have nothing but your real principal of about 5 or 6 millions at the most, for third-rate fortunes are never more than a fourth of what they appear to be, like the locomotive on a railway, the size of which is magnified by the smoke and steam surrounding it. Well, out of the 5 or 6 millions which form your real capital, you have just lost nearly 2 millions, which must, of course, in the same degree diminish your credit and fictitious fortune. To follow out my simile, your skin has been opened by bleeding, and this if repeated 3 or 4 times will cause death. So pay attention to it, my dear Monsieur Danglars. Do you want money? Do you wish me to lend you some? 30253M. What a bad calculator you are, exclaimed Danglars, calling to his assistance all his philosophy and dissimulation. I have made money at the same time by speculations which have succeeded. I have made up the loss of blood by nutrition. I lost a battle in Spain, I have been defeated in Trieste, but my naval army in India will have taken some galleons, and my Mexican pioneers will have discovered some mine. Very good, very good. But the wound remains and will reopen at the first loss. No, for I am only embarked in certainties, replied Danglars, with the air of a mountebank sounding his own praises. To involve me, 3 governments must crumble to dust. Well, such things have been. That there should be a famine. Recollect the 7 fat, and the 7 lean kine. Or that the sea should become dry, as in the days of Pharaoh, and even then my vessels would become caravans. So much the better. I congratulate you, my dear M. Danglars, said Monte Cristo. I see I was deceived, and that you belong to the class of second-rate fortunes. I think I may aspire to that honor, said Danglars with a smile, which reminded Monte Cristo of the sickly moons which bad artists are so fond of daubing into their pictures of ruins. But while we are speaking of business, Danglars added, pleased to find an opportunity of changing the subject. Tell me what I am to do for M. Cavalcanti. Give him money if he is recommended to you, and the recommendation seems good. Excellent. He presented himself this morning with a bond of 40,000 francs, payable at sight, on you, signed by Busoni, and returned by you to me, with your endorsement. Of course, I immediately counted him over the 40 banknotes. Monte Cristo nodded his head in token of assent. But that is not all, continued Danglars. He has opened an account with my house for his son. May I ask how much he allows the young man? 5,000 francs per month. 60,000 francs per year. I thought I was right in believing that Cavalcanti to be a stingy fellow. How can a young man live upon 5,000 francs a month? But you understand that if the young man should want a few thousands more, do not advance it. The father will never repay it. You do not know these ultramontane millionaires. They are regular misers. And by whom were they recommended to you? Oh, by the house of Fenci, one of the best in Florence. I do not mean to say you will lose, but nevertheless, mind you hold to the terms of the agreement. Would you not trust the Cavalcanti? I would advance 10 millions on his signature. I was only speaking in reference to the second-rate fortunes we were mentioning just now. And with all this, how unassuming he is. I should never have taken him for anything more than a mere major. And you would have flattered him, for certainly, as you say, he has no manner. The first time I saw him he appeared to me like an old lieutenant who had grown moldy under his epaulets. But all the Italians are the same. They are like old Jews when they are not glittering in oriental splendor. The young man is better, said Danglars. Yes, a little nervous perhaps, but upon the whole, he appeared tolerable. I was uneasy about him. Why? Because you met him at my house, just after his introduction into the world, as they told me. He has been traveling with a very severe tutor, and had never been to Paris before. I believe noblemen marry amongst themselves, do they not? Asked Danglars carelessly. They like to unite their fortunes. It is usual, certainly, but Cavalcanti is an original who does nothing like other people. I cannot help thinking that he has brought his son to France to choose a wife. Do you think so? I am sure of it. And you have heard his fortune mentioned? Nothing else was talked of, only some said he was worth millions, and others that he did not possess a farthing. And what is your opinion? I ought not to influence you, because it is only my own personal impression. Well, and it is that. My opinion is that all these old podestas, these ancient condottieri, for the Cavalcanti have commanded armies and governed provinces. My opinion, I say, is that they have buried their millions in corners, the secret of which they have transmitted only to their eldest sons, who have done the same from generation to generation, and the proof of this is seen in their yellow and dry appearance, like the florins of the Republic, which from being constantly gazed upon, have become reflected in them. Certainly, said Danglars, and this is further supported by the fact of their not possessing an inch of land. Very little at least. I know of none which Cavalcanti possesses, excepting his palace in Lucca. Ah, he has a palace, said Danglars laughing. Come, that is something. Yes, and more than that, he lets it to the Minister of Finance while he lives in a simple house. Oh, as I told you before, I think the old fellow is very close. Come, you do not flatter him. I scarcely know him. I think I have seen him 3 times in my life. All I know relating to him is through Busoni and himself. He was telling me this morning that, tired of letting his property lie dormant in Italy, which is a dead nation, he wished to find a method, either in France or England, of multiplying his millions. But remember, that though I place great confidence in Busoni, I am not responsible for this. Never mind. Accept my thanks for the client you have sent me. It is a fine name to inscribe on my ledgers, and my cashier was quite proud of it when I explained to him who the Cavalcanti were. By the way, this is merely a simple question. When this sort of people marry their sons, do they give them any fortune? Oh, that depends upon circumstances. I know an Italian prince, rich as a gold mine, one of the noblest families in Tuscany, who, when his sons married according to his wish, gave them millions, and when they married against his consent, merely allowed them 30 crowns a month. Should Andrea marry according to his father's views, he will perhaps give him 1, 2, or 3 millions. For example, supposing it were the daughter of a banker, he might take an interest in the house of the father-in-law of his son. Then again, if he disliked his choice, the major takes the key, double-locks his coffer, and Master Andrea would be obliged to live like the sons of a Parisian family, by shuffling cards or rattling the dice. Ah, that boy will find out some Bavarian or Peruvian princess. He will want a crown and El Dorado and Potosi. No, these grand lords on the other side of the Alps frequently marry into plain families. Like Jupiter, they like to cross the race. But do you wish to marry Andrea, my dear M. Danglars, that you are asking so many questions? Ma foi, said Danglars. It would not be a bad speculation, I fancy, and you know I am a speculator. You are not thinking of Mademoiselle Danglars, I hope. You would not like poor Andrea to have his throat cut by Albert? Albert, repeated Danglars, shrugging his shoulders. Ah well, he would care very little about it, I think. But he is betrothed to your daughter, I believe? Well, M. de Morcerf and I have talked about this marriage, but Madame de Morcerf and Albert? You do not mean to say that it would not be a good match? Indeed, I imagine that Mademoiselle Danglars is as good as M. de Morcerf. Mademoiselle Danglars' fortune will be great, no doubt, especially if the telegraph should not make any more mistakes. Oh, I do not mean her fortune only, but tell me. What? Why did you not invite M. and Madame de Morcerf to your dinner. I did so. But he excused himself on account of Madame de Morcerf being obliged to go to Dieppe for the benefit of sea air. Yes, yes, said Danglars, laughing. It would do her a great deal of good. Why so? Because it is the air she always breathed in her youth. Monte Cristo took no notice of this ill-natured remark. But still, if Albert be not so rich as Mademoiselle Danglars, said the Count, you must allow that he has a fine name? So he has, but I like mine as well. Certainly, your name is popular and does honor to the title they have adorned it with, but you are too intelligent not to know that according to a prejudice, too firmly rooted to be exterminated, a nobility which dates back 5 centuries is worth more than one that can only reckon 20 years. And for this very reason, said Danglars with a smile, which he tried to make sardonic, I prefer M. Andrea Cavalcanti to M. Albert de Morcerf. Still, I should not think the Morcerfs would yield to the Cavalcanti? The Morcerfs? Stay, my dear Count, said Danglars. You are a man of the world, are you not? I think so. And you understand heraldry? A little. Well, look at my coat of arms. It is worth more than Morcerf's. Why so? Because though I am not a baron by birth, my real name is, at least, Danglars. Well, what then? Well, his name is not Morcerf. How? Not Morcerf? Not the least in the world. Go on. I have been made a baron, so that I actually am one. He made himself a count, so that he is not one at all. Impossible. Listen, my dear Count. M. de Morcerf has been my friend, or rather my acquaintance, during the last 30 years. You know I have made the most of my arms, though I never forgot my origin. A proof of great humility or great pride, said Monte Cristo. Well, when I was a clerk, Morcerf was a mere fisherman. And then he was called Fernand. Only Fernand. Fernand Mondego. You are sure? Pardieu. I have bought enough fish of him to know his name. Then, why did you think of giving your daughter to him? Because Fernand and Danglars, being both parvenus, both having become noble, both rich, are about equal in worth, excepting that there have been certain things mentioned of him that were never said of me. What? Oh, nothing. Ah, yes. What you tell me recalls to mind something about the name of Fernand Mondego. I have heard that name in Greece. In conjunction with the affairs of Ali Pasha? Exactly so. This is the mystery, said Danglars. I acknowledge I would have given anything to find it out. It would be very easy if you much wished it. How so? Probably you have some correspondent in Greece? I should think so. At Yanina? Everywhere. Well, write to your correspondent in Yanina, and ask him what part was played by a Frenchman named Fernand Mondego in the catastrophe of Ali Tepelini. You are right, exclaimed Danglars, rising quickly. I will write today. Do so. I will. 30259M. And if you should hear of anything very scandalous, I will communicate it to you. You will oblige me. Danglars rushed out of the room, and made but one leap into his coupe. Chapter 67. The Office of the King's Attorney. Let us leave the banker driving his horses at their fullest speed, and follow Madame Danglars in her morning excursion. We have said that at 12:30 Madame Danglars had ordered her horses, and had left home in the carriage. She directed her course towards the Faubourg Saint-Germain, went down the Rue Mazarine, and stopped at the Passage du Pont-Neuf. She descended, and went through the passage. She was very plainly dressed, as would be the case with a woman of taste walking in the morning. At the Rue Guénégaud she called a cab, and directed the driver to go to the Rue de Harley. As soon as she was seated in the vehicle, she drew from her pocket a very thick black veil, which she tied on to her straw bonnet. She then replaced the bonnet, and saw with pleasure in a little pocket mirror, that her white complexion and brilliant eyes were alone visible. The cab crossed the Pont-Neuf and entered the Rue de Harley by the Place Dauphine. The driver was paid as the door opened, and stepping lightly up the stairs Madame Danglars soon reached the Salle de Papardoux. There was a great deal going on that morning, and many business-like persons at the Palais. Business-like persons pay very little attention to women, and Madame Danglars crossed the hall without exciting any more attention than any other woman calling upon her lawyer. There was a great press of people in M. de Villefort's antechamber, but Madame Danglars had no occasion even to pronounce her name. The instant she appeared the doorkeeper rose, came to her, and asked her whether she was not the person with whom the procureur had made an appointment, and on her affirmative answer being given, he conducted her by a private passage to M. de Villefort's office. The magistrate was seated in an armchair, writing, with his back towards the door. He did not move as he heard it open, and the doorkeeper pronounced the words, "Walk in, madam," and then recluse it. But no sooner had the man's footsteps ceased, than he started up, drew the bolts, closed the curtains, and examined every corner of the room. Then, when he had assured himself that he could neither be seen nor heard, and was consequently relieved of doubts, he said, "Thanks, madam. Thanks for your punctuality." And he offered a chair to Madame Danglars, which she accepted, for her heart beat so violently that she felt nearly suffocated. 30261M. "It is a long time, madam," said the procureur, describing a half-circle with his chair, so as to place himself exactly opposite to Madame Danglars. "It is a long time since I had the pleasure of speaking alone with you, and I regret that we have only now met to enter upon a painful conversation. Nevertheless, sir, you see I have answered your first appeal, although certainly the conversation must be much more painful for me than for you." Villefort smiled bitterly. "It is true then," he said, rather uttering his thoughts aloud than addressing his companion. "It is true then, that all our actions leave their traces, some sad, others bright, on our paths. It is true that every step in our lives is like the course of an insect on the sands. It leaves its track. Alas, to many the path is traced by tears." "Sir," said Madame Danglars, "you can feel for my emotion, can you not? Spare me then, I beseech you. When I look at this room, when so many guilty creatures have departed, trembling and ashamed, when I look at that chair before which I now sit trembling and ashamed, oh, it requires all my reason to convince me that I am not a very guilty woman, and you a menacing judge." Villefort dropped his head and sighed. "And I," he said, "I feel that my place is not in the judge's seat, but on the prisoner's bench." 30263M. "You," said Madame Danglars. "Yes, I think, sir, you exaggerate your situation," said Madame Danglars, whose beautiful eyes sparkled for a moment. "The paths of which you were just speaking have been traced by all young men of ardent imaginations. Besides the pleasure, there is always remorse from the indulgence of our passions, and after all, what have you men to fear from all this? The world excuses, and notoriety ennobles you." "Madam," replied Villefort, "you know that I am no hypocrite, or at least that I never deceive without a reason. If my brow be severe, it is because many misfortunes have clouded it. If my heart be petrified, it is that it might sustain the blows it has received. I was not so in my youth, I was not so on the night of the betrothal, when we were all seated around a table in the Rue du Cours at Marseilles. But since then everything has changed in and about me. I am accustomed to brave difficulties, and in the conflict to crush those who, by their own free will, or by chance, voluntarily or involuntarily, interfere with me in my career. It is generally the case that what we most ardently desire is as ardently withheld from us by those who wish to obtain it, or from whom we attempt to snatch it. Thus, the greater number of a man's errors come before him disguised under the specious form of necessity. Then, after error has been committed in a moment of excitement, of delirium, or of fear, we see that we might have avoided and escaped it. The means we might have used, which we in our blindness could not see, then seem simple and easy, and we say, why did I not do this instead of that? Women, on the contrary, are rarely tormented with remorse, for the decision does not come from you. Your misfortunes are generally imposed upon you, and your faults the results of others' crimes. In any case, sir, you will allow, replied Madame Danglars, that even if the fault were alone mine, I last night received a severe punishment for it. Poor thing, said Villefort, pressing her hand. It was too severe for your strength, for you were twice overwhelmed, and yet... Well, I must tell you. Collect all your courage, for you have not yet heard all. Ah, exclaimed Madame Danglars, alarmed. What is there more to hear? You only look back to the past, and it is, indeed, bad enough. Well, picture to yourself a future more gloomy still, certainly frightful, perhaps sanguinary. The Baroness knew how calm Villefort naturally was, and his present excitement frightened her so much that she opened her mouth to scream, but the sound died in her throat. "How has this terrible past been recalled?" cried Villefort. "How is it that it has escaped from the depths of the tomb and the recesses of our hearts, where it was buried, to visit us now, like a phantom, whitening our cheeks and flushing our brows with shame?" "Alas," said Hermine, "doubtless it is chance." "Chance," replied Villefort. "No, no, madam, there is no such thing as chance." "Oh yes, has not a fatal chance revealed all this? Was it not by chance the Count of Monte Cristo bought that house? Was it not by chance he caused the earth to be dug up? Is it not by chance that the unfortunate child was disinterred under the trees? That poor innocent offspring of mine, which I never even kissed, but for whom I wept many, many tears. Ah, my heart clung to the Count when he mentioned the dear spoil found beneath the flowers." "Well, no, madam, this is the terrible news I have to tell you," said Villefort in a hollow voice. "No, nothing was found beneath the flowers. There was no child disinterred, no. You must not weep, no, you must not groan, you must tremble." "What can you mean?" asked Madame Danglars, shuddering. "I mean that M. de Monte Cristo, digging underneath these trees, found neither skeleton nor chest, because neither of them was there." "Neither of them there?" repeated Madame Danglars, her staring, wide-open eyes expressing her alarm. "Neither of them there," she again said, as though striving to impress herself with the meaning of the words which escaped her. "No," said Villefort, burying his face in his hands. "No, 100 times no." "Then you did not bury the poor child there, sir? Why did you deceive me? Where did you place it? Tell me where." "There. But listen to me, listen, and you will pity me who has for 20 years alone borne the heavy burden of grief I am about to reveal, without casting the least portion upon you. Oh, you frighten me. But speak, I will listen. You recollect that sad night, when you were half expiring on that bed in the red damask room, while I, scarcely less agitated than you, awaited your delivery. The child was born, was given to me, motionless, breathless, voiceless. We thought it dead." Madame Danglars moved rapidly, as though she would spring from her chair, but Villefort stopped, and clasped his hands as if to implore her attention. "We thought it dead," he repeated. "I placed it in the chest, which was to take the place of a coffin. I descended to the garden, I dug a hole, and then flung it down in haste. Scarcely had I covered it with earth, when the arm of the Corsican was stretched towards me. I saw a shadow rise, and at the same time, a flash of light. I felt pain. I wished to cry out, but an icy shiver ran through my veins and stifled my voice. I fell lifeless and fancied myself killed. Never shall I forget your sublime courage, when, having returned to consciousness, I dragged myself to the foot of the stairs, and you, almost dying yourself, came to meet me. We were obliged to keep silent upon the dreadful catastrophe. You had the fortitude to regain the house, assisted by your nurse. A duel was the pretext for my wound. Though we scarcely expected it, our secret remained in our own keeping alone. I was taken to Versailles. For 3 months I struggled with death. At last, as I seemed to cling to life, I was ordered to the south. For men carried me from Paris to Chalons, walking 6 leagues a day. Madame de Villefort followed the litter in her carriage. At Chalons I was put upon the Saône. Thence I passed on to the Rhône, whence I descended, merely with the current, to Alès. At Alès I was again placed on my litter, and continued my journey to Marseilles. My recovery lasted 6 months. I never heard you mentioned, and I did not dare inquire for you. When I returned to Paris, I learned that you, the widow of M. de Nargonne, had married M. Danglars. What was the subject of my thoughts from the time consciousness returned to me? Always the same, always the child's corpse, coming every night in my dreams, rising from the earth, and hovering over the grave with menacing look and gesture. I inquired immediately on my return to Paris. The house had not been inhabited since we left it, but it had just been let for 9 years. I found the tenant. I pretended that I disliked the idea that a house belonging to my wife's father and mother should pass into the hands of strangers. I offered to pay them for canceling the lease. They demanded 6,000 francs. I would have given 10,000. I would have given 20,000. I had the money with me. I made the tenant sign the deed of resolution, and when I had obtained what I so much wanted, I galloped to Auteuil. No one had entered the house since I had left it. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I ascended into the red room, and waited for night. There all the thoughts which had disturbed me during my year of constant agony came back with double force. The Corsican, who had declared the vendetta against me, who had followed me from Nîmes to Paris, who had hid himself in the garden, who had struck me, had seen me dig the grave, had seen me inter the child. He might become acquainted with your person. Nay, he might even then have known it. Would he not one day make you pay for keeping this terrible secret? Would it not be a sweet revenge for him when he found that I had not died from the blow of his dagger? It was therefore necessary, before everything else, and at all risks, that I should cause all traces of the past to disappear. That I should destroy every material vestige. Too much reality would always remain in my recollection. It was for this I had annulled the lease. It was for this I had come. It was for this I was waiting. Night arrived. I allowed it to become quite dark. I was without a light in that room. When the wind shook all the doors, behind which I continually expected to see some spy concealed, I trembled. I seemed everywhere to hear your moans behind me in the bed, and I dared not turn around. My heart beat so violently that I feared my wound would open. At length, one by one, all the noises in the neighborhood ceased. I understood that I had nothing to fear, that I should neither be seen nor heard. So I decided upon descending to the garden. Listen, Hermine. I consider myself as brave as most men, but when I drew from my breast the little key of the staircase, which I had found in my coat, that little key we both used to cherish so much, which you wished to have fastened to a golden ring, when I opened the door, and saw the pale moon shedding a long stream of white light on the spiral staircase like a spectre, I leaned against the wall, and nearly shrieked. I seemed to be going mad. At last I mastered my agitation. I descended the staircase step by step. The only thing I could not conquer was a strange trembling in my knees. I grasped the railings. If I had relaxed my hold for a moment, I should have fallen. I reached the lower door. Outside this door a spade was placed against the wall. I took it, and advanced towards the thicket. I had provided myself with a dark lantern. In the middle of the lawn I stopped to light it, then I continued my path. It was the end of November, all the verdure of the garden had disappeared. The trees were nothing more than skeletons with their long bony arms. And the dead leaves sounded on the gravel under my feet. My terror overcame me to such a degree as I approached the thicket, that I took a pistol from my pocket and armed myself. I fancied continually that I saw the figure of the Corsican between the branches. I examined the thicket with my dark lantern. It was empty. I looked carefully around. I was indeed alone. No noise disturbed the silence but the owl, whose piercing cry seemed to be calling up the phantoms of the night. I tied my lantern to a forked branch I had noticed a year before at the precise spot where I stopped to dig the hole. The grass had grown very thickly there during the summer, and when autumn arrived no one had been there to mow it. Still one place where the grass was thin attracted my attention. It evidently was there I had turned up the ground. I went to work. The hour, then, for which I had been waiting during the last year had at length arrived. How I worked, how I hoped, how I struck every piece of turf, thinking to find some resistance to my spade. But no, I found nothing, though I had made a hole twice as large as the first. I thought I had been deceived, had mistaken the spot. I turned around, I looked at the trees, I tried to recall the details which had struck me at the time. A cold, sharp wind whistled through the leafless branches, and yet the drops fell from my forehead. I recollected that I was stabbed just as I was trampling the ground to fill up the hole. While doing so I had leaned against a laburnum. Behind me was an artificial rockery, intended to serve as a resting place for persons walking in the garden. In falling, my hand, relaxing its hold of the laburnum, felt the coldness of the stone. On my right I saw the tree, behind me the rock. I stood in the same attitude, and threw myself down. I rose, and again began digging and enlarging the hole. Still I found nothing, nothing. The chest was no longer there. 30269M. The chest no longer there? Murmured Madame Danglars, choking with fear. Think not I contented myself with this one effort, continued Villefort. No, I searched the whole thicket. I thought the assassin, having discovered the chest, and supposing it to be a treasure, had intended carrying it off, but perceiving his error, had dug another hole, and deposited it there. But I could find nothing. Then the idea struck me that he had not taken these precautions, and had simply thrown it in a corner. In the last case I must wait for daylight to renew my search. I remained in the room and waited. Oh heaven! 30271 m. When daylight dawned I went down again. My first visit was to the thicket. I hoped to find some traces which had escaped me in the darkness. I had turned up the earth over a surface of more than 20 feet square, and a depth of 2 feet. A laborer would not have done in a day what occupied me an hour. But I could find nothing, absolutely nothing. Then I renewed the search. Supposing it had been thrown aside, it would probably be on the path which led to the little gate. But this examination was as useless as the first, and with a bursting heart I returned to the thicket, which now contained no hope for me. Oh, cried Madame Danglars, it was enough to drive you mad. I hoped for a moment that it might, said Villefort, but that happiness was denied me. However, recovering my strength and my ideas, why, said I, should that man have carried away the corpse? But you said, replied Madame Danglars, he would require it as a proof. Ah no, madame, that could not be. Dead bodies are not kept a year. They are shown to a magistrate, and the evidence is taken. Now nothing of the kind has happened. What then? Asked Hermine, trembling violently. Something more terrible, more fatal, more alarming for us. The child was perhaps alive, and the assassin may have saved it. Madame Danglars uttered a piercing cry, and seizing Villefort's hands exclaimed, My child was alive, said she. You buried my child alive? You were not certain my child was dead and you buried it? Ah! Madame Danglars had risen, and stood before the procureur, whose hands she wrung in her feeble grasp. I know not. I merely suppose so, as I might suppose anything else, replied Villefort with a look so fixed. It indicated that his powerful mind was on the verge of despair and madness. Ah, my child, my poor child, cried the Baroness, falling on her chair, and stifling her sobs in her handkerchief. Villefort, becoming somewhat reassured, perceived that to avert the maternal storm gathering over his head, he must inspire Madame Danglars with the terror he felt. You understand then that if it were so, said he, rising in his turn, and approaching the Baroness, to speak to her in a lower tone, we are lost. This child lives and someone knows it lives. Someone is in possession of our secret. And since Monte Cristo speaks before us of a child disinterred, when that child could not be found, it is he who is in possession of our secret. Just God avenging God, murmured Madame Danglars. Villefort's only answer was a stifled groan. But the child, sir? Repeated the agitated mother. How I have searched for him, replied Villefort, wringing his hands. How I have called him in my long sleepless nights. How I have longed for royal wealth to purchase 1,000,000 of secrets from 1,000,000 of men, and to find mine among them. At last, one day, when for the 100th time I took up my spade, I asked myself again and again what the Corsican could have done with the child. A child encumbers a fugitive. Perhaps on perceiving it was still alive, he had thrown it into the river. Impossible, cried Madame Danglars. A man may murder another out of revenge, but he would not deliberately drown a child. Perhaps, continued Villefort, he had put it in the foundling hospital. Oh yes, yes, cried the Baroness. My child is there. I ran to the hospital, and learned that the same night, the night of the 20th of September, a child had been brought there, wrapped in part of a fine linen napkin, purposely torn in half. This portion of the napkin was marked with half a baron's crown, and the letter H. Truly, truly, said Madame Danglars, all my linen is marked thus. Monsieur de Nargonne was a baron, and my name is Hermine. Thank God, my child was not then dead. No, it was not dead. And you can tell me so without fearing to make me die of joy. Where is the child? Villefort shrugged his shoulders. Do I know? Said he. And do you believe that if I knew I would relate to you all its trials and all its adventures as would a dramatist or a novel writer? Alas, no, I know not. A woman, about 6 months after, came to claim it with the other half of the napkin. This woman gave all the requisite particulars, and it was entrusted to her. But you should have inquired for the woman. You should have traced her. And what do you think I did? I feigned a criminal process, and employed all the most acute bloodhounds and skillful agents in search of her. They traced her to Chalons, and there they lost her. They lost her. Yes, forever. Madame Danglars had listened to this recital with a sigh, a tear, or a shriek for every detail. "And this is all," said she. "And you stopped there?" "Oh no," said Villefort. "I never ceased to search and to inquire. However, the last 2 or 3 years I had allowed myself some respite. But now I will begin with more perseverance and fury than ever, since fear urges me, not my conscience." "But," replied Madame Danglars, "the Count of Monte Cristo can know nothing, or he would not seek our society as he does." "Oh, the wickedness of man is very great," said Villefort, "since it surpasses the goodness of God. Did you observe that man's eyes while he was speaking to us?" "No. But have you ever watched him carefully? Doubtless he is capricious, but that is all. One thing alone struck me. Of all the exquisite things he placed before us, he touched nothing. I might have suspected he was poisoning us." "And you see you would have been deceived." "Yes, doubtless. But believe me, that man has other projects. For that reason I wished to see you, to speak to you, to warn you against everyone, but especially against him." "Tell me," cried Villefort, fixing his eyes more steadfastly on her than he had ever done before. "Did you ever reveal to anyone our connection?" "Never to anyone." "You understand me," replied Villefort affectionately. "When I say anyone, pardon my urgency. To anyone living, I mean?" Yes, I understand very well," ejaculated the Baroness. "Never, I swear to you. Were you ever in the habit of writing in the evening what had transpired in the morning? Do you keep a journal?" "No, my life has been passed in frivolity. I wish to forget it myself." "Do you talk in your sleep?" 30275 I sleep soundly like a child. Do you not remember?" The color mounted to the Baroness's face, and Villefort turned awfully pale. "It is true," said he, in so low a tone that he could hardly be heard. "Well," said the Baroness. "Well, I understand what I now have to do," replied Villefort. "In less than 1 week from this time I will ascertain who this M. de Monte Cristo is, whence he comes, where he goes, and why he speaks in our presence of children that have been disinterred in a garden." Villefort pronounced these words with an accent which would have made the Count shudder had he heard him. Then he pressed the hand the Baroness reluctantly gave him, and led her respectfully back to the door. Madame Danglars returned in another cab to the passage, on the other side of which she found her carriage, and her coachman sleeping peacefully on his box while waiting for her. Chapter 68. A Summer Ball. The same day during the interview between Madame Danglars and the Procureur, a traveling carriage entered the Rue du Helder, passed through the gateway of number 27, and stopped in the yard. In a moment the door was opened, and Madame de Morcerf alighted, leaning on her son's arm. Albert soon left her, ordered his horses, and having arranged his toilet, drove to the Champs-Élysées, to the house of Monte Cristo. The Count received him with his habitual smile. It was a strange thing that no one ever appeared to advance a step in that man's favor. Those who would, as it were, force a passage to his heart, found an impassable barrier. Morcerf, who ran towards him with open arms, was chilled as he drew near, in spite of the friendly smile, and simply held out his hand. Monte Cristo shook it coldly, according to his invariable practice. "Here I am, dear Count. Welcome home again." "I arrived an hour since." "From Dieppe?" "No, from Treport." "Indeed. And I have come at once to see you." "That is extremely kind of you," said Monte Cristo with a tone of perfect indifference. "And what is the news?" "You should not ask a stranger, a foreigner, for news." "I know it, but in asking for news, I mean, have you done anything for me?" "Had you commissioned me?" said Monte Cristo, feigning uneasiness. Come," said Albert. "Do not assume so much indifference. It is said, sympathy travels rapidly, and when at Treport, I felt the electric shock. You have either been working for me or thinking of me." "Possibly," said Monte Cristo. "I have indeed thought of you, but the magnetic wire I was guiding acted indeed without my knowledge." 30277 "Indeed. Pray tell me how it happened." "Willingly. M. Danglars dined with me." "I know it. To avoid meeting him, my mother and I left town. But he met here Andrea Cavalcanti." "Your Italian prince?" "Not so fast, Andrea only calls himself Count. Calls himself, do you say? Yes, calls himself. Is he not a count? What can I know of him? He calls himself so. I, of course, give him the same title, and everyone else does likewise. What a strange man you are. What next? You say M. Danglars dined here? Yes, with Count Cavalcanti, the Marquis his father, Madame Danglars M., and Madame de Villefort, charming people, M. de Bray, Maximilian Morel, and M. de Châteaurenaud. Did they speak of me? Not a word. So much the worse. Why so? I thought you wished them to forget you. If they did not speak of me, I am sure they thought about me, and I am in despair. How will that affect you, since Mademoiselle Danglars was not among the number here who thought of you? Truly, she might have thought of you at home. I have no fear of that. Or if she did, it was only in the same way in which I think of her. Touching sympathy. So you hate each other, said the Count. Listen, said Morcerf. If Mademoiselle Danglars were disposed to take pity on my supposed martyrdom on her account, and would dispense with all matrimonial formalities between our two families, I am ready to agree to the arrangement. In a word, Mademoiselle Danglars would make a charming mistress, but a wife diable. And this, said Monte Cristo, is your opinion of your intended spouse? Yes, it is rather unkind, I acknowledge, but it is true. But as this dream cannot be realized, since Mademoiselle Danglars must become my lawful wife, live perpetually with me, sing to me, compose verses and music within 10 paces of me, and that for my whole life, it frightens me. One may forsake a mistress, but a wife, good heavens! There she must always be. And to marry Mademoiselle Danglars would be awful. You are difficult to please, Viscount. Yes, for I often wish for what is impossible. What is that? To find such a wife as my father found. Monte Cristo turned pale, and looked at Albert, while playing with some magnificent pistols. Your father was fortunate, then? Said he. You know my opinion of my mother, Count. Look at her, still beautiful, witty, more charming than ever. For any other son to have stayed with his mother for 4 days at Treport, it would have been a condescension or a martyrdom, while I return, more contented, more peaceful, shall I say more poetic, than if I had taken Queen Mab or Titania as my companion. 30279M. That is an overwhelming demonstration, and you would make everyone vow to live a single life. Such are my reasons for not liking to marry Mademoiselle Danglars. Have you ever noticed how much a thing is heightened in value when we obtain possession of it? The diamond which glittered in the window at Merlies or Fosson's shines with more splendor when it is our own. But if we are compelled to acknowledge the superiority of another, and still must retain the one that is inferior, do you not know what we have to endure? Worldling, murmured the Count. Thus I shall rejoice when Mademoiselle Eugénie perceives I am but a pitiful atom, with scarcely as many 100,000 francs as she has millions. Monte Cristo smiled. One plan occurred to me, continued Albert. Franz likes all that is eccentric. I tried to make him fall in love with Mademoiselle Danglars, but in spite of 4 letters, written in the most alluring style, he invariably answered, My eccentricity may be great, but it will not make me break my promise. That is what I call devoted friendship, to recommend to another one whom you would not marry yourself. Albert smiled. Apropos, continued he, Franz is coming soon, but it will not interest you. You dislike him, I think? I, said Monte Cristo. My dear Viscount, how have you discovered that I did not like M. Franz? I like everyone. And you include me in the expression everyone. Many thanks. Let us not mistake, said Monte Cristo. I love everyone as God commands us to love our neighbor as Christians, but I thoroughly hate but a few. Let us return to M. Franz d'Épinay. Did you say he was coming? Yes, summoned by M. de Villefort, who is apparently as anxious to get Mademoiselle Valentine married as M. Danglars is to see Mademoiselle Eugénie settled. It must be a very irksome office to be the father of a grown-up daughter. It seems to make one feverish, and to raise one's pulse to 90 beats a minute until the deed is done. But M. d'Épinay, unlike you, bears his misfortune patiently. Still more, he talks seriously about the matter, puts on a white tie, and speaks of his family. He entertains a very high opinion of M. and Madame de Villefort. Which they deserve, do they not? I believe they do. M. de Villefort has always passed for a severe but a just man. There is then one, said Monte Cristo, whom you do not condemn like poor Danglars? Because I am not compelled to marry his daughter perhaps, replied Albert, laughing. Indeed, my dear sir, said Monte Cristo, you are revoltingly foppish. I foppish? How do you mean? Yes, pray take a cigar and cease to defend yourself, and to struggle to escape marrying Mademoiselle Danglars. Let things take their course, perhaps you may not have to retract. Bah, said Albert, staring. Doubtless, my dear Viscount, you will not be taken by force, and seriously, do you wish to break off your engagement? I would give 100,000 francs to be able to do so. Then make yourself quite easy. M. Danglars would give double that sum to attain the same end. Am I indeed so happy? Said Albert, who still could not prevent an almost imperceptible cloud passing across his brow. But my dear Count, has M. Danglars any reason? Ah, there is your proud and selfish nature. You would expose the self-love of another with a hatchet, but you shrink if your own is attacked with a needle. But yet M. Danglars appeared. Delighted with you, was he not? Well, he is a man of bad taste, and is still more enchanted with another. I know not whom. Look and judge for yourself. Thank you, I understand. But my mother, no, not my mother, I mistake. My father intends giving a ball. A ball at this season? Summer balls are fashionable. If they were not, the Countess has only to wish it, and they would become so. You are right. You know they are select affairs. Those who remain in Paris in July must be true Parisians. Will you take charge of our invitation to Messrs. Cavalcanti? When will it take place? On Saturday. M. Cavalcanti's father will be gone. But the son will be here. Will you invite young M. Cavalcanti? I do not know him, Viscount. You do not know him? No, I never saw him until a few days since, and am not responsible for him. But you receive him at your house? That is another thing. He was recommended to me by a good abbé, who may be deceived. Give him a direct invitation, but do not ask me to present him. If he were afterwards to marry Mademoiselle Danglars, you would accuse me of intrigue, and would be challenging me. Besides, I may not be there myself. Where? At your ball. Why should you not be there? Because you have not yet invited me. But I come expressly for that purpose. You are very kind, but I may be prevented. If I tell you one thing, you will be so amiable as to set aside all impediments. Tell me what it is. My mother begs you to come. The Comtesse de Morcerf? Said Monte Cristo, starting. Ah, Count, said Albert. I assure you Madame de Morcerf speaks freely to me, and if you have not felt those sympathetic fibers of which I spoke just now thrill within you, you must be entirely devoid of them, for during the last 4 days we have spoken of no one else. You have talked of me? Yes, that is the penalty of being a living puzzle. Then I am also a puzzle to your mother? I should have thought her too reasonable to be led by imagination. A problem, my dear Count, for everyone, for my mother as well as others, much studied, but not solved. You still remain an enigma, do not fear. My mother is only astonished that you remain so long unsolved. I believe, while the Countess G. takes you for Lord Ruthven, my mother imagines you to be Cagliostro, or the Count Saint-Germain. The first opportunity you have, confirm her in her opinion. It will be easy for you, as you have the philosophy of the one and the wit of the other. I thank you for the warning, said the Count. I shall endeavor to be prepared for all suppositions. You will then come on Saturday? Yes, since Madame de Morcerf invites me. You are very kind. Will M. Danglars be there? He has already been invited by my father. We shall try to persuade the great Diegueso, 11 de Villefort, to come, but have not much hope of seeing him. Never despair of anything, says the proverb. Do you dance, Count? I dance. Yes, you. It would not be astonishing. That is very well before one is over 40. No, I do not dance, but I like to see others do so. Does Madame de Morcerf dance? Never. You can talk to her, she so delights in your conversation. Indeed. 30283M. Yes, truly, and I assure you, you are the only man of whom I have heard her speak with interest. Albert rose and took his hat. The Count conducted him to the door. "I have one thing to reproach myself with," said he, stopping Albert on the steps. "What is it?" "I have spoken to you indiscreetly about Danglars. On the contrary, speak to me always in the same strain about him." "I am glad to be reassured on that point. Apropos, when do you expect M. d'Épinay?" 5 or 6 days hence at the latest." "And when is he to be married?" "Immediately on the arrival of M. and Madame de Saint-Méran." "Bring him to see me. Although you say I do not like him, I assure you I shall be happy to see him." "I will obey your orders, my lord. Goodbye." "Until Saturday, when I may expect you, may I not?" "Yes, I promised you." The Count watched Albert, waving his hand to him. When he had mounted his phaeton, Monte Cristo turned and seeing Bertuccio, "What news?" said he. "She went to the Palais," replied the steward. "Did she stay long there?" "An hour and a half." "Did she return home?" "Directly." "Well, my dear Bertuccio," said the Count, "I now advise you to go in quest of the little estate I spoke to you of in Normandy." Bertuccio bowed, and as his wishes were in perfect harmony with the order he had received, he started the same evening. Chapter 69. The Inquiry. M. de Villefort kept the promise he had made to Madame Danglars, to endeavor to find out how the Count of Monte Cristo had discovered the history of the house at Auteuil. He wrote the same day for the required information to M. de Beauville, who, from having been an inspector of prisons, was promoted to a high office in the police, and the latter begged for 2 days' time to ascertain exactly who would be most likely to give him full particulars. At the end of the second day M. de Villefort received the following note. "The person called the Count of Monte Cristo is an intimate acquaintance of Lord Wilmore, a rich foreigner, who is sometimes seen in Paris and who is there at this moment. He is also known to the Abbé Busoni, a Sicilian priest of high repute in the East, where he has done much good." M. de Villefort replied by ordering the strictest inquiries to be made respecting these 2 persons. His orders were executed, and the following evening he received these details. The abbé, who was in Paris only for a month, inhabited a small 2-storied house behind St. Sulpice. There were 2 rooms on each floor, and he was the only tenant. The 2 lower rooms consisted of a dining room, with a table, chairs, and sideboard of walnut, and a wainscoted parlor, without ornaments, carpet, or timepiece. It was evident that the abbé limited himself to objects of strict necessity. He preferred to use the sitting room upstairs, which was more library than parlor, and was furnished with theological books and parchments, in which he delighted to bury himself for months at a time. According to his valet de chambre, his valet looked at the visitors through a sort of wicket, and if their faces were unknown to him or displeased him, he replied that the abbé was not in Paris, an answer which satisfied most persons, because the abbé was known to be a great traveler. Besides, whether at home or not, whether in Paris or Cairo, the abbé always left something to give away, which the valet distributed through this wicket in his master's name. The other room near the library was a bedroom. A bed without curtains for armchairs and a couch, covered with yellow Utrecht velvet, composed, with a prie-dieu, all its furniture. Lord Wilmore resided in Rue Fontaine-Saint-Georges. He was one of those English tourists who consume a large fortune in traveling. He hired the apartment in which he lived furnished, passed only a few hours in the day there, and rarely slept there. One of his peculiarities was never to speak a word of French, which he however wrote with great facility. The day after this important information had been given to the king's attorney, a man alighted from a carriage at the corner of the Rue Férou, and rapping at an olive-green door, asked if the Abbé Busoni were within. "No, he went out early this morning," replied the valet. "I might not always be content with that answer," replied the visitor, "for I come from one to whom everyone must be at home. But have the kindness to give the Abbé Busoni." "I told you he was not at home," repeated the valet. "Then on his return give him that card and this sealed paper. Will he be at home at 8 o'clock this evening?" "Doubtless, unless he is at work, which is the same as if he were out." "I will come again at that time," replied the visitor, who then retired. At the appointed hour the same man returned in the same carriage, which, instead of stopping this time at the end of the Rue Férou, drove up to the green door. He knocked. and it opened immediately to admit him. From the signs of respect the valet paid him, he saw that his note had produced a good effect. "Is the abbé at home?" asked he. "Yes, he is at work in his library, but he expects you, sir," replied the valet. The stranger ascended a rough staircase, and before a table, illumined by a lamp whose light was concentrated by a large shade while the rest of the apartment was in partial darkness, he perceived the abbé in a monk's dress, with a cowl on his head such as was used by learned men of the Middle Ages. "Have I the honor of addressing the Abbé Busoni?" asked the visitor. "Yes, sir," replied the abbé. "And you are the person whom M. de Beauville, formerly an inspector of prisons, sends to me from the prefect of police?" "Exactly, sir." "One of the agents appointed to secure the safety of Paris?" "Yes, sir," replied the stranger with a slight hesitation, and blushing. The abbé replaced the large spectacles, which covered not only his eyes but his temples, and sitting down motioned to his visitor to do the same. "I am at your service, sir," said the abbé, with a marked Italian accent. "The mission with which I am charged, sir," replied the visitor, speaking with hesitation, "is a confidential one on the part of him who fulfills it, and him by whom he is employed." The abbé bowed. "Your probity," replied the stranger, "is so well known to the prefect that he wishes as a magistrate to ascertain from you some particulars connected with the public safety, to ascertain which I am deputed to see you. It is hoped that no ties of friendship or humane consideration will induce you to conceal the truth. Provided, sir, the particulars you wish for do not interfere with my scruples or my conscience. I am a priest, sir, and the secrets of confession, for instance, must remain between me and God, and not between me and human justice. Do not alarm yourself, monsieur. We will duly respect your conscience." At this moment the abbé pressed down his side of the shade and so raised it on the other, throwing a bright light on the stranger's face, while his own remained obscured. "Excuse me, abbé," said the envoy of the prefect of the police, "but the light tries my eyes very much." The abbé lowered the shade. "Now, sir, I am listening, go on." "I will come at once to the point. Do you know the Count of Monte Cristo?" "You mean Monsieur Zacon, I presume?" "Zacon? Is not his name Monte Cristo?" "Monte Cristo is the name of an estate, or rather of a rock, and not a family name." "Well, be it so, let us not dispute about words, and since M. de Monte Cristo and M. Zacon are the same." "Absolutely the same." "Let us speak of M. Zacon." "Agreed." "I asked you if you knew him?" "Extremely well." "Who is he?" "The son of a rich shipbuilder in Malta." "I know that is the report, but as you are aware, the police does not content itself with vague reports. However," replied the abbé, with an affable smile, "when that report is in accordance with the truth, everybody must believe it, the police as well as all the rest." "Are you sure of what you assert?" "What do you mean by that question?" "Understand, sir, I do not in the least suspect your veracity. I ask if you are certain of it?" "I knew his father, M. Zacon." "Ah, indeed. And when a child I often played with the son in the timber yards. But whence does he derive the title of Count? You are aware that may be bought." "In Italy?" "Everywhere." "And his immense riches, whence does he procure them?" "They may not be so very great." "How much do you suppose he possesses?" "From 150 to 200,000 livres per annum." "That is reasonable," said the visitor. "I have heard he had 3 or 4 millions. 200,000 per annum would make 4 millions of capital." "But I was told he had 4 millions per annum." "That is not probable." "Do you know this island of Monte Cristo?" "Certainly, everyone who has come from Palermo, Naples, or Rome to France by sea must know it, since he has passed close to it and must have seen it." "I am told it is a delightful place." "It is a rock." "And why has the Count bought a rock?" "For the sake of being a count. In Italy one must have territorial possessions to be a count." "You have, doubtless, heard the adventures of M. Zacon's youth?" "The father's?" "No, the son's." "I know nothing certain. At that period of his life, I lost sight of my young comrade." "Was he in the wars?" "I think he entered the service." "In what branch?" "In the navy." "Are you not his confessor?" "No, sir. I believe he is a Lutheran." "A Lutheran?" "I say, I believe such is the case. I do not affirm it. Besides, liberty of conscience is established in France. Doubtless, and we are not now inquiring into his creed but his actions. In the name of the prefect of police, I ask you what you know of him. He passes for a very charitable man. Our Holy Father, the Pope, has made him a Knight of Jesus Christ for the services he rendered to the Christians in the East. He has 5 or 6 rings as testimonials from Eastern monarchs of his services. Does he wear them? No, but he is proud of them. He is better pleased with rewards given to the benefactors of man than to his destroyers. He is a Quaker then? Exactly, he is a Quaker, with the exception of the peculiar dress. Has he any friends? Yes, everyone who knows him is his friend. But has he any enemies? One only. What is his name? Lord Wilmore. Where is he? He is in Paris just now. Can he give me any particulars? Important ones. He was in India with Zacone. Do you know his abode? It's somewhere in the Chaussée d'Antin, but I know neither the street nor the number. 30289 Are you at variance with the Englishman? I love Zacone and he hates him. We are consequently not friends. Do you think the Count of Monte Cristo had ever been in France before he made this visit to Paris? To that question I can answer positively. No, sir, he had not, because he applied to me 6 months ago for the particulars he required. And as I did not know when I might again come to Paris, I recommended M. Cavalcanti to him. Andrea. No, Bartolomeo, his father. Now, sir, I have but one question more to ask, and I charge you in the name of honor, of humanity, and of religion, to answer me candidly. What is it, sir? Do you know with what design M. de Monte Cristo purchased a house at Auteuil? Certainly, for he told me. What is it, sir? To make a lunatic asylum of it, similar to that founded by the Count of Pisani at Palermo. Do you know about that institution? I have heard of it. It is a magnificent charity. Having said this, the abbé bowed to imply he wished to pursue his studies. The visitor either understood the abbé's meaning, or had no more questions to ask. He arose, and the abbé accompanied him to the door. You are a great almsgiver, said the visitor. And although you are said to be rich, I will venture to offer you something for your poor people. Will you accept my offering? I thank you, sir. I am only jealous in one thing, and that is that the relief I give should be entirely from my own resources. However, my resolution, sir, is unchangeable, but you have only to search for yourself and you will find, alas, but too many objects upon whom to exercise your benevolence. The abbé once more bowed as he opened the door. The stranger bowed and took his leave, and the carriage conveyed him straight to the house of M. de Villefort. An hour afterwards the carriage was again ordered, and this time it went to the Rue Fontaine Saint-Georges, and stopped at number 5, where Lord Wilmore lived. The stranger had written to Lord Wilmore, requesting an interview, which the latter had fixed for 10 o'clock. As the envoy of the prefect of police arrived 10 minutes before 10, he was told that Lord Wilmore, who was precision and punctuality personified, was not yet come in, but that he would be sure to return as the clock struck. The visitor was introduced into the drawing room, which was like all other furnished drawing rooms. A mantelpiece with 2 modern Sèvres vases, a timepiece representing Cupid with his bent bow, a mirror with an engraving on each side, one representing Homer carrying his guide, the other Belisarius begging, a grayish paper, red and black tapestry. Such was the appearance of Lord Wilmore's drawing room. It was illuminated by lamps with ground glass shades which gave only a feeble light, as if out of consideration for the envoy's weak sight. After 10 minutes' expectation the clock struck 10. At the 5th stroke the door opened and Lord Wilmore appeared. He was rather above the middle height, with thin reddish whiskers, light complexion and light hair, turning rather grey. He was dressed with all the English peculiarity, namely in a blue coat, with gilt buttons and high collar, in the fashion of 1811, a white kerseymere waistcoat, and nankeen pantaloons, 3 inches too short, but which were prevented by straps from slipping up to the knee. His first remark on entering was, "You know, sir, I do not speak French?" "I know you do not like to converse in our language," replied the envoy. "But you may use it," replied Lord Wilmore. "I understand it." "And I," replied the visitor, changing his idiom, "know enough of English to keep up the conversation." Do not put yourself to the slightest inconvenience. Ah, said Lord Wilmore, with that tone which is only known to natives of Great Britain. The envoy presented his letter of introduction, which the latter read with English coolness, and having finished, "I understand," said he, "perfectly. 30293 m. Then began the questions which were similar to those which had been addressed to the Abbé Busoni, but as Lord Wilmore, in the character of the Count's enemy, was less restrained in his answers, they were more numerous. He described the youth of Monte Cristo, who he said at 10 years of age, entered the service of one of the petty sovereigns of India who make war on the English. It was there Wilmore had first met him and fought against him. And in that war Zacone had been taken prisoner, sent to England, and consigned to the hulks, whence he had escaped by swimming. Then began his travels, his duels, his caprices. Then the insurrection in Greece broke out, and he had served in the Grecian ranks. While in that service he had discovered a silver mine in the mountains of Thessaly, but he had been careful to conceal it from everyone. After the Battle of Navarino, when the Greek government was consolidated, he asked of King Otho a mining grant for that district, which was given him. Hence that immense fortune, which, in Lord Wilmore's opinion, possibly amounted to 1 or 2 millions per annum. A precarious fortune, which might be momentarily lost by the failure of the mine. But, asked the visitor, do you know why he came to France? He is speculating in railways, said Lord Wilmore, and as he is an expert chemist and physicist, he has invented a new system of telegraphy, which he is seeking to bring to perfection. How much does he spend yearly? Asked the prefect. Not more than 500,000 or 600,000 francs, said Lord Wilmore. He is a miser. Hatred evidently inspired the Englishman, who, knowing no other reproach to bring on the Count, accused him of avarice. Do you know his house at Auteuil? Certainly. What do you know respecting it? Do you wish to know why he bought it? Yes. The Count is a speculator, who will certainly ruin himself in experiments. He supposes there is in the neighborhood of the house he has bought a mineral spring equal to those at Bagners, Luchen and Cauteretz. He is going to turn his house into a bat house, as the Germans term it. He has already dug up all the garden 2 or 3 times to find the famous spring, and being unsuccessful he will soon purchase all the contiguous houses. Now as I dislike him, and hope his railway, his electric telegraph, or his search for baths, will ruin him, I am watching for his discomfiture, which must soon take place. What was the cause of your quarrel? When he was in England he seduced the wife of one of my friends. Why do you not seek revenge? I have already fought 3 duels with him, said the Englishman. The first with the pistol, the second with the sword, and the third with the saber. And what was the result of those duels? The first time he broke my arm, the second he wounded me in the breast, and the third time made this large wound. The Englishman turned down his shirt collar, and showed a scar, whose redness proved it to be a recent one. So that, you see, there is a deadly feud between us. But, said the envoy, you do not go about it in the right way to kill him, if I understand you correctly. Ah, said the Englishman, I practice shooting every day, and every other day Grazier comes to my house. This was all the visitor wished to ascertain, or rather, all the Englishman appeared to know. The agent arose, and having bowed to Lord Wilmore, who returned his salutation with the stiff politeness of the English, he retired. Lord Wilmore, having heard the door close after him, returned to his bedroom, where with one hand he pulled off his light hair, his red whiskers, his false jaw, and his wound, to resume the black hair, dark complexion, and pearly teeth of the Count of Monte Cristo. It was M. de Villefort, and not the prefect, who returned to the house of M. de Villefort. The procureur felt more at ease, although he had learned nothing really satisfactory, and for the first time since the dinner party at Auteuil, he slept soundly. Chapter 70. The Ball. It was in the warmest days of July, when in due course of time the Saturday arrived upon which the ball was to take place at M. de Morcerf's. It was 10 o'clock at night. The branches of the great trees in the garden of the Count's house stood out boldly against the azure canopy of heaven, which was studded with golden stars, but where the last fleeting clouds of a vanishing storm yet lingered. From the apartments on the ground floor might be heard the sound of music, with the whirl of the waltz and gallop, while brilliant streams of light shone through the openings of the Venetian blinds. At this moment the garden was only occupied by about 10 servants, who had just received orders from their mistress to prepare the supper, the serenity of the weather continuing to increase. Until now, it had been undecided whether the supper should take place in the dining room, or under a long tent erected on the lawn, but the beautiful blue sky, studded with stars, had settled the question in favor of the lawn. The gardens were illuminated with colored lanterns, according to the Italian custom, and as is usual in countries where the luxuries of the table, the rarest of all luxuries in their complete form, are well understood, the supper table was loaded with wax lights and flowers. 30297 m. At the time the Countess of Morcerf returned to the rooms, after giving her orders, many guests were arriving, more attracted by the charming hospitality of the Countess than by the distinguished position of the Count. For owing to the good taste of Mercedes, one was sure of finding some devices at her entertainment worthy of describing, or even copying in case of need. Madame Danglars, in whom the events we have related had caused deep anxiety, had hesitated about going to Madame de Morcerf's, when during the morning her carriage happened to meet that of Villefort. The latter made a sign, and when the carriages had drawn close together said, "You are going to Madame de Morcerf's, are you not?" "No," replied Madame Danglars, "I am too ill." "You are wrong," replied Villefort significantly. "It is important that you should be seen there." "Do you think so?" asked the Baroness. "I do." "In that case I will go." And the two carriages passed on towards their different destinations. Madame Danglars therefore came, not only beautiful in person, but radiant with splendor. She entered by one door at the time when Mercedes appeared at the door. The Countess took Albert to meet Madame Danglars. He approached, paid her some well-merited compliments on her toilet, and offered his arm to conduct her to a seat. Albert looked around him. "You are looking for my daughter?" said the Baroness, smiling. "I confess it," replied Albert. "Could you have been so cruel as not to bring her?" "Calm yourself. She has met Mademoiselle de Villefort and has taken her arm. See, they are following us, both in white dresses, one with a bouquet of camellias, the other with one of myosotis. But tell me." "Well, what do you wish to know?" "Will not the Count of Monte Cristo be here tonight?" 17, replied Albert. "What do you mean?" "I only mean that the Count seems the rage," replied the Viscount, smiling, "and that you are the 17th person that has asked me the same question. The Count is in fashion. I congratulate him upon it." "And have you replied to everyone as you have to me?" "Ah, to be sure, I have not answered you. Be satisfied, we shall have this lion. We are among the privileged ones." "Were you at the opera yesterday?" "No. He was there." "Ah, indeed? And did the eccentric person commit any new originality? Can he be seen without doing so?" Elssler was dancing in L'Audible Boitou. The Greek princess was in ecstasies. After the cachucha he placed a magnificent ring on the stem of a bouquet, and threw it to the charming danseuse, who in the third act, to do honor to the gift, reappeared with it on her finger. "And the Greek princess, will she be here?" "No, you will be deprived of that pleasure. Her position in the Count's establishment is not sufficiently understood. Wait, leave me here, and go and speak to Madame de Villefort, who is trying to attract your attention." Albert bowed to Madame Danglars, and advanced towards Madame de Villefort, whose lips opened as he approached. "I wager anything," said Albert, interrupting her, "that I know what you were about to say." "Well, what is it? If I guess rightly, will you confess it?" "Yes." "On your honor?" "On my honor." "You were going to ask me if the Count of Monte Cristo had arrived, or was expected." "Not at all. It is not of him that I am now thinking. I was going to ask you if you had received any news of Monsieur Franz." "Yes, yesterday." "What did he tell you?" "That he was leaving at the same time as his letter." "Well, now then, the Count." "The Count will come, of that you may be satisfied." "You know that he has another name besides Monte Cristo?" "No, I did not know it. Monte Cristo is the name of an island, and he has a family name." "I never heard it." "Well then, I am better informed than you. His name is Zaccone." "It is possible." "He is a Maltese." "That is also possible." "The son of a shipowner." "Really, you should relate all this aloud. You would have the greatest success." "He served in India, discovered a mine in Thessaly, and comes to Paris to establish a mineral water cure at Auteuil. Well, I'm sure, said Morcerf. This is indeed news. Am I allowed to repeat it? Yes, but cautiously tell one thing at a time, and do not say I told you. Why so? Because it is a secret just discovered. By whom? The police. Then the news originated at the prefect's last night. Paris, you can understand, is astonished at the sight of such unusual splendor, and the police have made inquiries. Well, well. Nothing more is wanting than to arrest the Count as a vagabond, on the pretext of his being too rich. Indeed, that doubtless would have happened if his credentials had not been so favorable. Poor Count! And is he aware of the danger he has been in? I think not. Then it will be but charitable to inform him. When he arrives, I will not fail to do so. Just then, a handsome young man, with bright eyes, black hair, and glossy mustache, respectfully bowed to Madame de Villefort. Albert extended his hand. Madame, said Albert, allow me to present to you Maximilien Morel, captain of Spahis, one of our best, and above all, of our bravest officers. I have already had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman at Auteuil, at the house of the Count of Monte Cristo, replied Madame de Villefort, turning away with marked coldness of manner. This answer, and especially the tone in which it was uttered, chilled the heart of poor Morel. But a recompense was in store for him. Turning around, he saw near the door a beautiful fair face, whose large blue eyes were, without any marked expression, fixed upon him, while the bouquet of myosotis was gently raised to her lips. The salutation was so well understood that Morel, with the same expression in his eyes, placed his handkerchief to his mouth, and these two living statues, whose hearts beat so violently under their marble aspect, separated from each other by the whole length of the room, forgot themselves for a moment, or rather forgot the world in their mutual contemplation. They might have remained much longer lost in one another, without anyone noticing their abstraction. The Count of Monte Cristo had just entered. We have already said that there was something in the Count which attracted universal attention wherever he appeared. It was not the coat, unexceptional in its cut, though simple and unornamented. It was not the plain white waistcoat. It was not the trousers, that displayed the foot so perfectly formed. It was none of these things that attracted the attention. It was his pale complexion, his waving black hair, his calm and serene expression, his dark and melancholy eye, his mouth chiseled with such marvelous delicacy, which so easily expressed such high disdain. These were what fixed the attention of all upon him. Many men might have been handsomer, but certainly there could be none whose appearance was more significant, if the expression may be used. Everything about the Count seemed to have its meaning, for the constant habit of thought which he had acquired had given an ease and vigor to the expression of his face, and even to the most trifling gesture, scarcely to be understood. Yet the Parisian world is so strange, that even all this might not have won attention had there not been connected with it a mysterious story gilded by an immense fortune. 30301 Meanwhile he advanced through the assemblage of guests under a battery of curious glances towards Madame de Morcerf, who, standing before a mantelpiece ornamented with flowers, had seen his entrance in a looking-glass placed opposite the door, and was prepared to receive him. She turned towards him with a serene smile just at the moment he was bowing to her. No doubt she fancied the Count would speak to her, while on his side the Count thought she was about to address him, but both remained silent, and after a mere bow, Monte Cristo directed his steps to Albert, who received him cordially. "Have you seen my mother?" asked Albert. "I have just had the pleasure," replied the Count. "But I have not seen your father." "See, he is down there, talking politics with that little group of great geniuses." "Indeed," said Monte Cristo. "And so those gentlemen down there are men of great talent. I should not have guessed it. And for what kind of talent are they celebrated? You know there are different sorts. That tall, harsh-looking man is very learned. He discovered, in the neighborhood of Rome, a kind of lizard with a vertebra more than lizards usually have, and he immediately laid his discovery before the Institute. The thing was discussed for a long time, but finally decided in his favor. I can assure you the vertebra made a great noise in the learned world, and the gentleman, who was only a knight of the Legion of Honor, was made an officer." "Come," said Monte Cristo, This cross seems to me to be wisely awarded. I suppose, had he found another additional vertebra, they would have made him a commander. Very likely, said Albert. And who can that person be who has taken it into his head to wrap himself up in a blue coat embroidered with green? Oh, that coat is not his own idea. It is the Republic's which deputed David XII to devise a uniform for the academicians. Indeed, said Monte Cristo. So this gentleman is an academician? Within the last week he has been made one of the learned assembly. And what is his especial talent? His talent? I believe he thrusts pins through the heads of rabbits, he makes fowls eat matter, and punches the spinal marrow out of dogs with whalebone. And he is made a member of the Academy of Sciences for this? No, of the French Academy. But what has the French Academy to do with all this? I was going to tell you. It seems that his experiments have very considerably advanced the cause of science, doubtless? No, that his style of writing is very good. This must be very flattering to the feelings of the rabbits into whose heads he has thrust pins, to the fowls whose bones he has dyed red, and to the dogs whose spinal marrow he has punched out. Albert laughed. And the other one? Demanded the Count. That one. Yes, the third. The one in the dark blue coat? Yes. He is a colleague of the Count, and one of the most active opponents to the idea of providing the Chamber of Peers with a uniform. He was very successful upon that question. He stood badly with the liberal papers, but his noble opposition to the wishes of the court is now getting him into favor with the journalists. They talk of making him an ambassador. 30303M. And what are his claims to the peerage? He has composed 2 or 3 comic operas, written 4 or 5 articles in the Siècle, and voted 5 or 6 years on the ministerial side. Bravo, Viscount, said Monte Cristo smiling. You are a delightful cicerone. And now you will do me a favor, will you not? What is it? Do not introduce me to any of these gentlemen, and should they wish it, you will warn me. Just then the Count felt his arm pressed. He turned round. It was Danglars. Ah, is it you, Baron? Said he. Why do you call me Baron? Said Danglars. You know that I care nothing for my title. I am not like you, Viscount. You like your title, do you not? Certainly, replied Albert, seeing that without my title I should be nothing, while you, sacrificing the Baron, would still remain the millionaire. Which seems to me the finest title under the royalty of July, replied Danglars. Unfortunately, said Monte Cristo, one's title to a millionaire does not last for life, like that of Baron, Peer of France or Academician, for example, the millionaires Frank and Pullman of Frankfurt, who have just become bankrupts. Indeed, said Danglars, becoming pale. Yes, I received the news this evening by a courier. I had about 1 million in their hands, but warned in time, I withdrew it a month ago. Ah, mon Dieu, exclaimed Danglars. They have drawn on me for 200,000 francs. Well, you can throw out the draft. Their signature is worth 5%. Yes, but it is too late, said Danglars. I have honored their bills. Then, said Monte Cristo, here are 200,000 francs gone after. Hush, do not mention these things, said Danglars. Then, approaching Monte Cristo, he added, especially before young M. Cavalcanti, after which he smiled, and turned towards the young man in question. Albert had left the Count to speak to his mother, Danglars to converse with young Cavalcanti. Monte Cristo was for an instant alone. Meanwhile the heat became excessive. The footmen were hastening through the rooms with waiters loaded with ices. Monte Cristo wiped the perspiration from his forehead, but drew back when the waiter was presented to him. He took no refreshment. Madame de Morcerf did not lose sight of Monte Cristo. She saw that he took nothing, and even noticed his gesture of refusal. Albert, she asked, did you notice that? What, mother? That the Count has never been willing to partake of food under the roof of M. de Morcerf. Yes, but then he breakfasted with me. Indeed, he made his first appearance in the world on that occasion. But your house is not M. de Morcerf's, murmured Mercedes. And since he has been here I have watched him. Well, he has taken nothing yet. The Count is very temperate. Mercedes smiled sadly. Approach him, said she. And when the next waiter passes, insist upon his taking something. But why, mother? Just to please me, Albert, said Mercedes. Albert kissed his mother's hand and drew near the Count. Another salver passed, loaded like the preceding ones. She saw Albert attempt to persuade the Count, but he obstinately refused. Albert rejoined his mother. She was very pale. Well, said she, you see he refuses? Yes, but why need this annoy you? You know, Albert, women are singular creatures. I should like to have seen the Count take something in my house, if only an ice. Perhaps he cannot reconcile himself to the French style of living, and might prefer something else. Oh no, I have seen him eat of everything in Italy. No doubt he does not feel inclined this evening. And besides, said the Countess, accustomed as he is to burning climates, possibly he does not feel the heat as we do. I do not think that, for he has complained of feeling almost suffocated, and asked why the Venetian blinds were not opened as well as the windows. In a word, said Mercedes, it was a way of assuring me that his abstinence was intended. And she left the room. A minute afterwards the blinds were thrown open, and through the jessamine and clematis that overhung the window one could see the garden ornamented with lanterns, and the supper laid under the tent. Dancers, players, talkers, all uttered an exclamation of joy. Everyone inhaled with delight the breeze that floated in. At the same time Mercedes reappeared, paler than before, but with that imperturbable expression of countenance which she sometimes wore. She went straight to the group of which her husband formed the center. Do not detain those gentlemen here, Count, she said. They would prefer, I should think, to breathe in the garden rather than suffocate here, since they are not playing. Ah, said a gallant old general, who in 1809 had sung Partant pour la Syrie. We will not go alone to the garden. Then, said Mercedes, I will lead the way. Turning towards Monte Cristo, she added, Count, will you oblige me with your arm? The Count almost staggered at these simple words. Then he fixed his eyes on Mercedes. It was only a momentary glance, but it seemed to the Countess to have lasted for a century, so much was expressed in that one look. He offered his arm to the Countess. She took it, or rather just touched it with her little hand, and they together descended the steps, lined with rhododendrons and camellias. Behind them, by another outlet, a group of about 20 persons rushed into the garden with loud exclamations of delight.